So, hello and welcome to the next episode of Fiddler's Green podcast number 73, Canons and Contradictions. This is now on Friday night or Saturday morning or something. Good grief, guys. I've been having problems with this podcast in terms of its scheduling, in terms of many things, trying to get this on an even keel again. It turns out my schedule's a lot more inflexible than I originally thought it was when I did this every other week. I'm going to continue to do them every other week just because I need to have some kind of cadence, and having a regular podcast seems to be really unprofessional, which I'm kind of striving to be more professional in the things that I do on the blog and on the podcast. I always feel really weird because I don't feel that these podcasts are very polished on my end. I always have to call back to back in the day, but this is we're basically just past the 10-year anniversary of the Distributist YouTube channel, and for allow me to give you some back in the days. But back in the day, podcasts didn't have to have this professional veneer to them. You flipped on Google Hangouts and then you just got on and you played video games and you chatted with people, and that was it. That was all that it was expected to be. Because and this is sort of impossible to imagine from the perspective of 2026, but the entire culture was kind of caught up in this mode of kind of consumerist complacency. And for the longest time, when I started doing these live streams, these solos, uh, the the idea was that I was trying to distinguish myself that I am not a streamer. This channel is not a streaming channel. This channel is a video essay channel. But then, the video essay died algorithmically, and I had to change over my essay writing operations from video to text, which was where all the attention was. And in the meantime, this podcast kind of became the main product, but I never really trained myself to be a solo podcaster. I still haven't even really gotten the flow. I mean, I've been doing this for 7 years now, this live stream, and I still even haven't gotten the flow down with how I should be speaking. It's not something that comes naturally to me. So I'm always a little bit embarrassed that this product is kind of a secondary product, my main one being the essays on Substack. But that's neither here nor there. The big problem, the two big problems we have right now are, number one, uh, the the fact that I can't seem to consolidate a day to do this on regularly. I think it will be Wednesday. I'm hoping that I can readjust my schedule so that it will be consistently held on Wednesday. I think that's a good day for me. It just family obligations keep on coming up. The second thing is that apparently entropy is broken. And this might be a permanent state of affairs. I hate to say this. I don't want to make an announcement for that company, but it appears that this is, at least for the foreseeable future, not going to be an option for me. And I would if I end up turning back to entropy, then it's going to be months, because it sounds like they're having serious trouble. And I don't want to speak for them, but so for the time being, I've literally turned on Google Super Chats. I guess is that button's active now or something. I see it's active. And then that will reach me. Well, you can do the Super Chats that way if we want to, and we can try to get through this. I hate giving money to Google. I would really rather use an alternative service, but I'm going to have to use Google Super Chats because there's no other way to organize questions and kind of get some compensation for doing these things. So, that will have to be it. So, thank you very much. Maybe I'll do a mailbag. That could be a more classy way to do it. Like, here's my mailbag of questions that the audience have sent me, or something like that. That's very classic, right? You can send me letters. Letters. It could literally be, that my subtext is called Letters from Fiddler's Green. It could literally be like I bust out this huge thing of stationery, put on my monocle and start reading it off. I think that might actually be a way of classing the podcast up a little bit. That's not even the only bad. The first thing is the schedule. I had to postpone this podcast 3 times. That's the first problem. The second problem is the fact that my payment service is broken, perhaps indefinitely. And the third problem is the fact that I live in California and we are now in May, and this room is starting to go from being pleasantly cool to being outright infernal whenever I have to speak within it with the door closed for 2 hours. And so if I start turning red, understand that these are the situations that I work in. I work in the Central Valley of California. The map's right below me here. I'll point my vague area. I'm there. I'm there in that little slit of depressed land, which means that we have very hot summers. This is not San Francisco. If you were Antifa looking to get me, but yeah, and because of that, I'm essentially working out of a sauna right now, and you're gonna have to take what you get. No entropy chats. We'll try to make do with Google if people want to throw me a tip or something, and yeah, irregular schedule and a really weird plan today. I haven't quite consolidated what I want to talk about. I mean, look, I don't know what to say. I mean, you guys all have the internet, and everyone knows that day in and day out, the internet keeps on getting more fake. Politics continuously gets more real, and the internet continuously gets more fake. And I guess it's interesting. It's interesting because it is a clarifying process. Originally, we were all lamenting the death of discourse. We did this for 3 years. Now I'm kind of like through the anger stage. I'm kind of getting to the acceptance stage. The acceptance stage of the death of discourse is now, when it comes to any interaction that you have online, immediately what happens is that there's kind of like a real side of the conversation, and then there's a fake side of the conversation. And the people who get sucked into the fake side of the conversation are immediately exposed as being unserious and people who are chasing clout. And the people who notice the real side of the conversation, you kind of recognize kindred spirits. You can kind of see through. That sounds kind of horribly Gnostic, like, oh, there's a secret reality of the internet, and we see it, and everyone else is just in the blue pill matrix. But I'm going through stories that obviously have a real and fake component that I think are fairly obvious, and that kind of lead in all one direction. This week. This has been since Monday. This is my favorite story. Behind it, you see my favorite web comic of the week. It's a variation on that Alexander Greek name guy's work, but I'll go and explain the story. So this week, Grandpa Crazy Russian, or everyone's favorite Alexander Dugin, somebody who's famous for being an unhinged lunatic philosopher. This comes from a very brave tradition of continental philosophy. Going crazy is kind of a thing you do when you do philosophy on the continent. Everyone goes crazy, right? And for Russians generally, I mean what Russian hasn't gone crazy? No Russian who's ever done anything significant hasn't gone crazy, at least for a little bit. I mean, I don't think Tolstoy was particularly stable. I don't know if he would have declared war on the entire European race, but I wouldn't put it past him. In fact, I kind of expected some monologue like that at the end of War and Peace, to be quite honest. So yes, the news headline read, "Crazy Russian gets crazy. News at 11." So Alexander Dugin, probably after consulting with a vodka bottle for the entire night, decided to go on a long rant in which I didn't even really read it because it's just unhinged. He declares all of Western civilization to be terrible and degenerate, condemns the white race. What do you know? White Russians are fine. The white race is evil, of course. And this is in the typical unhinged boomer form. He's just a stream of consciousness projecting this into the ether, hoping that there's an audience for it. I have no idea what the audience will be. It certainly didn't play well on the right wing. But I don't know. There's this well, I do know who the audience is, and I'm going to get into this. What is it like? I hate Europe. I'm Russia, and we should need to destroy Europe. The white race is evil. Then, like 4 hours later, he says that he goes into like full like Will Martin. Will Martin is this troll on Substack, and after every one of my posts on Substack, he just writes BAP F word N word continuously again and again, accusing me of being these things. And I guess it's like a take on like this is supposed to be some kind of reference to Julius Evola, who very famously called all Americans N-wordization Europeans, essentially. This is a classic take of his way back in the day. I thought we were kind of past the Evola phase. I was never the biggest Evola fan. I'm like, he's got his moments. That's sure. So maybe that's what Dugan is channeling. But in between saying that the white race is evil and then accusing everyone to the west of the Volga as being not real white people, this guy is having quite a vodka-fueled binge. And, look, guys, I mean, pull up a seat, grab some popcorn, watch the latest continental philosopher of our age lose his shit. I mean, Twitter didn't exist when Nietzsche went on his syphilitic rants, but it's here for us to capture Dugan's complete crash out. So I don't know. I was just having a great time looking at this absolute trash coming out of Dugan. It's just like Grandpa decided that he was going to start speaking like 4chan. Like Grandpa Boomer decided that he'd grab a bottle of vodka and then start channeling 4chan memes and then repeating them back into the Twitter machine. Except like it's this like honored philosopher who's doing this to himself. I was just laughing my ass off for the first few tweets of these that I read. This is the internet in 2026, so I'm not taking any of this particularly seriously. But then, there was the subset of people, this very serious group of right wingers. They're on the task, and they're just looking at these and they go, oh my God, Dugan, how dare he betray us? How dare Dugan betray us? You know what? We have to find every single person that Dugan ever talked to and make sure that they go down in the name of the white race. And it's all of these neocon boomer accounts with the flag of Israel in their bio. And they're so offended. They're so incensed. What would it take to get a boomer to be incensed about the slights and insults against the white race? What would it take to get a guy with the Israel flag in his bio suddenly stand up and be Gentile European nationalist, greatest soldier? I mean, just think about that for a second. I mean, he must have done something really bad. They must be really invested in people's affiliation with kooky alcoholic Russian academics. This is a line too far. We were fine when he tried to demographically replace the white race with mass migration. But when you interview a continental philosopher that's having a mental break, that is a step too far. Oh my God, that is we're going nuts. We got to cancel Michael Millerman. I mean, I guess look, if you were going to go after anybody for associations with Dugan, it would be Millerman. He's been Dugan's biggest defender. That's look, these whole things where you cancel people because somebody else had a mental breakdown is insane. I mean, imagine what if you were a Nietzsche scholar and Nietzsche lived in an era with Twitter. Can you imagine how many syphilitic rants you'd hear about on the regular? Would that mean that we have to bury the genealogy of morals or the birth of tragedy or thus spoke Zarathustra? We ought to throw those all out. And not only that, we had to throw out all the work of people who talked to him. But that this is what very serious, very concerned right-wing activists on Twitter. How dare he? How dare you talk to Dugan? Oh my God. And they're in my mentions. And they're not asking about Dugan, who I what haven't ever read Dugan. He seemed like a crackpot. Everything I've heard about him has been crackpot. When he's been on people's shows like McIntyre and Boyce, I think he was on Boyce's channel. He sounded like a crackpot to me. Okay, but this is again, this is not, this is not, this is par for the course when it comes to continental philosophers. This is the game. You write your tract and then you go crazy. That's part of the thing. And and they're like, "How, Dave, did you hear? Dugan has betrayed the white race. It's time to get the other people who betrayed the white race." Oh my God, who betrayed the white race? Oh, well, it's everyone who's ever talked to Alexander Dugan, starting with R.N. McIntyre. So do you denounce R.N. McIntyre? No, I don't fucking denounce R.N. McIntyre. What are you talking about? What are you absolutely insane boomers talking about? I'm so disappointed in you, Dave. I'm so disappointed in you that you didn't denounce one of your longtime friends because a Russian on the other side of the world went into a drunken, crazy Twitter spat. But these people are serious. They're serious. For 3 or 4 days, people were disowning each other because they fell on the right side or the wrong side of an imaginary divide over a relationship with a Russian academic nutcase who doesn't even live in any Western country and who's only famous for being a nutcase. He's only famous for being a crackpot. And people were just tearing each other apart for this. It's kind of amazing. And although this is the one good thing that came out of it was the inversion of the Biden meme, where he captures a white European girl who thinks that she's a nationalist and a defender of indigenous European rights. And she says, "No, I'll never read Ebola." And then Dugan says, "Well, then you ain't white." And then he drains the whiteness out of her, just like Joe Biden drained the whiteness out of all of the black people who didn't vote for him. This is, I mean, it was just a demonstration of it's funny, like the sane people and the good people don't fall into this sort of high school girl recrimination. Oh, do you have the Alexander Dugan is the person that we're hating on Twitter right now. So now we have to evaluate everybody based on how close or far they are from the Alexander Dugan cooties. Like that's what we're doing, right? We're running Twitter like mean girls at a teenage lunch table. I mean that's what the internet is for, right? I mean maybe that is what the internet is for. This is something that we've learned in the last 10 years is that the internet is fundamentally a feminine media form. It's fundamentally a feminine media form. So everything essentially descends into gossip girl politics. Who are you friends with? Who do you denounce? Who is the person that we're all angry at today? Again, and again, rinse and repeat. The question is who actually allows themselves to fall into this that's the eternal question. The eternal question is who's falling into this and what is ultimately anyone getting out of this situation? I've signed off from this discourse, but I still have a Twitter feed. Like I still hear people talk about this stuff. I still read Substacks, and we had this conversation. In 2025, the big conversation that we tried to hash out was gender. How do we solve the dating crisis between men and women? Look, we've been having this conversation since basically 2014 with the initial explosion of, fourth wave millennial feminism, intersectional feminism of the millennial variety, the kind of Lindy West feminism. In 2012, it exploded with stuff like Jezebel. And then in 2014, there was pushback and there was this huge debate, and we discussed feminism and the declining relationships between men and women. And sometime around 2 weeks ago, just before I did the last podcast in this series, there was this big study published in, I forget what it was, the New Statesman. That's what the magazine was, which originally, I believe, was the home of people like Laurie Penny. This is a British publication. They were known to be center left. And at least back in the old days, they were known as the rag that had pushed forward. They basically mainstream these intersectional personalities broadly in the orbit of what in America was Jezebel at the time. And now, they're conducting a study. How many of these studies need to be done is obvious. These things are all manifestly obviously going on. The study they had recently was, well, guys, did you know? It turns out that when you poll men and women display much more radical political attitudes than men do. They express much more hatred towards men generally than men express towards women. Shock, horror. We've known that for 10 years. You've known that for 10 years. Johanna Cox in Substack, which is just this absolute vapid bimbo. She was the counterpart to this other absolute, I can't say it, but it's the other thing that Will Martin likes calling me, not the N-word. This absolute F-slur. And they did a podcast. I forget what the podcast was called. Some vapid libertarian bullshit. And she's on Substack today lecturing people on how they misread statistics. And it's essentially the Adam Conover method of debunking statistics. You take the study that you have in front of you and you find 5 things wrong with it. And then you say, it's debunked, and you discard it. That's not how you do these things. You take a variety of different studies from a variety of different perspectives that are looking at the problem from different angles, and then you try to combine it into a picture of what's actually going on in an interpersonal way. What is the actual thing that's going on in our society right now? Like, we can all see changes. We have gobs of data that demonstrate that the relationships that Zoomers exhibit in between men and women is radically different than when I was in high school or college. And people will say, well, people matched up in 2000. There wasn't hypergamy then. That doesn't disprove hypergamy, but it does prove that there's been a massive change in how men and women relate to each other. And, so these perspectives from people like Hannah Cox trying to debunk the whole thing just immediately fall through. But in the meantime, you have to watch this woman who's obviously one of these Hollywood tryhards that only recently decided to go into politics because there was a demand for people who could talk about politics, who could also look good in a sundress. I guess that seems to be the qualifications. Could never, ever argue her point in front of a camera against an adversarial audience. And that's it. She debunked it. But look, she debunked the one study that had the women's opinions getting more radical over time. But there's 1,000 more that demonstrate the exact same thing. Moreover, you can just look at how women behave in this day and age. If you live in any major metropolitan area, you can look at the attitudes expressed in major publications that appeal to them. And that correlated with the data that we have on relationships and how they are radically different in the Zoomer generation, make the thesis that women have been radicalized a very obvious corollary of all of those data points using a holistic point. The Reddit treats data like atheists treat the Bible. Like, atheists treat the Bible, they read through the Bible and they ignore the larger framework. And then they read it until they come across 1-2 sentence piece structure that demonstrates what they want to say, and then they take that quote and they throw it at people, or they demonstrate a contradiction and say it's debunked. And people who have been watching this channel for a decade or whatever, they know that I had, like, one of my big journeys back from atheism, or more agnosticism at that stage, was I was at a atheist versus agnostic debate, and I was we were talking about the Bible and horrible punishments from the Old and the New Testament, the typical kind of ones that you talk about in all of these debates. And the speaker at the time was trying to nail the Christian to the wall about not only kind of anti-humanitarian ideas coming from the Old Testament, because people, the reaction that Christians had to atheists in what was it, 2007, 8, 6, 2006. In 2006, the reaction that Christian pastors had to atheist challenges were, how do we cuck out as hard and as fast as possible? So if someone comes to you and says, God commanded the death penalty for adulterers in Leviticus, you're like, oh, wow. No, he didn't really mean that. Jesus abrogated that with his teachings. It's all love and kindness in the New Testament. There's no attempt to create a broader historical context. They immediately concede frame. And, it's no wonder that they lost. But this time, the speaker, who was supposed to be an expert on this stuff, he started quoting all of these horrible punishments, presumably that he said Jesus recommended for faithless servants in the New Testament. And I listened to this, and I was someone who's read the New Testament multiple times, not least because I had a brief stint in Catholic school when I was in junior high school. And I was thinking to myself, that does not sound like something that Jesus recommended as moral law. Sure enough, I look up the quotes, and they're part of a parable. They're part of a parable about a landlord punishing faithless servants. And it's just like, okay, so what you're lifting parable, and you're radically misreading this and taking it out of context. You didn't read that parable at all. You just scanned the whole thing until you found the quote that you wanted it, and you cut and pasted it out, and you hope that nobody noticed. And it's the same way that libertarians do statistics. They don't try to develop, they don't try to ask themselves. This is why I say that there's no such thing as a data-driven decision. Data-driven decisions depend on the frame of the question. So when we try to get statistics and we try to figure out what's going on, there has to be a pre-existing question. And the question is, have male and female relations changed in the last 20 years? And if so, what is the driver for them? And in that front, once you frame the question properly, it is obvious that the driver is essentially ideological. It's basically, the driver is, ironically enough, women. And it's ironically enough, women's exposure to ideology that they encounter on the internet. That is the driver of it. That's what drove this stuff on Tumblr back in 2011. That's what accelerated it through the TikTok phase and up into, other areas of social media. This is why every single woman, or not every single one, but a huge plurality of women in the Zoomer generation have absolutely politically broken brains and can't stop talking about how much they like men. And there's tons and tons and tons of examples of this, of data that demonstrates that this is going on. But no. Hannah Cox can debunk one statement, and we're off to the races. I'm getting ahead of myself. That's not really the story. I'm just complaining about Hannah Cox because she's a useless person and has no real reason to be online at all, as far as I'm concerned. But I mean, what kind of broke my brain was, it's not when, I wrote an article, what was it, last week or the week before last, about trying to terminate the endless repetition of the gender conversation that was going on Substack, because it never, ever, ever seemed to end. And I tried my best to do it. I tried to be funny. I'm trying to work on other more serious projects, so this was basically just a filler piece, but a lot of people really liked it. It did very, very well as far as the Substack algorithm went. But after writing the article, I was very, very conscious of conversations that were just designed to be conversations, or conversations that were designed to go somewhere. And then I catch this talk with Chris Williamson, Freya India, and I think it's Bridget Fetisi. It might be somebody else. But these I have genuinely very good opinions on Chris Williamson. I have perfectly fine opinions of Freya India. And the other two people, they seem perfectly fine as well. And they're talking about exactly what we're talking about now, the problem that exists between men and women. And they just, and the problem is, what they did for 2 hours, they described the problem, and they re-described the problem, and they re-described the problem, and they re-described the problem, and they wrung their hands, and they wrung their hands, and they wrung their hands. And hey, maybe that would be good enough if this were 2022 and this was the first time these problems were being brought up in this nice little neat studio type podcast. Of course, people were talking about this on these kind of you know these garage band podcasts like the one that I'm running right now out of the side room in my house. People have been talking about this stuff for decades, at least 10 years since I have started doing blogging. And obviously more like 20 if you're talking about the internet writ large when this stuff started coming onto the scene. And maybe if this was 2022 and this is the first time that Chris Williamson or one of these neat little yuppie, safe, edgy podcasts was covering this stuff, then I would be really blown away in a sense. I would be like, oh my God, I really have to listen to this. But I'm sorry, Chris Williamson has had people discuss this issue with him at least twice before with Marion Harrington and Louis Perry. He's had other people from the problem with men. I mean, that's a mainstay of his show at this stage. Freya India has been circulating these talking points for at least 2 or 3 years. I'm done redescribing the problem. We got to start talking about solutions here. And the problem is that for 2 hours, these people talk about the problem and redescribe it, and nobody comes up with any solutions. And any solution is kind of shot down. It's pre-disqualified as being hard. I say that my wife is testing out her super chat system, which means she gave me 2 super chats for $2, which means that we just gave Google a few dollars because that's from my account. So hey, I guess I have to pay the tax to our overlords at Google for the privilege of using their platform. Really, for the privileges of having a social media platform that the banking cartels still think is a legitimate person that can handle money without getting audited by one of the local governments. That is very good on you, Google. Thank you for being in the good graces of the banking class and an avenue which we can channel money through. That's perfect. I love using Google. Oh no. Okay, before my wife gives me any more super chats, let's keep on going. I mean, at some point, the conversation just has to move on. The conversation has to move on, and I don't know. Again, like I'm trying to figure out. I mean, the conversation is moving on in certain spheres. You can talk about. It's not like you can't do anything about these problems. It's not like you can't organize. It's not like you can't redesign institutions to handle these problems better. I guess, and I think this is sort of the idea that Freya India has. It is a misguided idea. It is a misguided idea. And I'm going to do my slides massively out of sync here. I wonder if I can select the one that I want to go to from the menu. Does that interfere with the projection? Oh, it does not. Okay. I think the idea that Freya India and Chris Williamson have is the typical liberal delusion of how these things work. So what do you have? You have underground garage band podcasters and bloggers like myself, and then many, many people who came before me. We talk about crazy issues like I never really talked about men and women. I did talk about the downsides of the sexual revolution, although I was not breaking any new ground insofar as the Catholic perspective was concerned. So we talk about these crazy ideas. We talk about these crazy things like sexual revolution is bad, or maybe we talk about authors like Julia Savola, who has nothing to do with that, but just throwing things out there. Then some of the more well-to-do podcasters who have nice little, they have nice little oak tables and four-way podcast setups with coasters. They invite well-to-do people that the mainstream likes to discuss the issue. And from this discussion flows cultural and policy change or something. The problem is I don't believe that is what is going to happen anymore. Right now, we are at the high watermark of the mainstream's ability to acknowledge that this problem is going on. If Democrats get back into office, they will shut the door on this rhetoric as fast as possible because the Democrat Party's future political prospects rely on this problem not being solved. The more men and women get married and have children, the less they vote Democrat. So why would you want, as a party, to solve the relationship crisis? The Democratic Party has a business model that is identical to that of Tinder, or what is it? Hinge? Is that the new one? I don't know. I haven't been dating in 10 years. Ironically, I met my wife the same year I started this YouTube channel. Auspicious year of 2016. Also, the year everyone went crazy. So yeah, sure. We've mainstreamed this idea now. The Democrats don't want people to fix dating. They do not want men and women to have good opinions of each other because when they do, they get married and have kids. And when they get married and have kids, they stop voting Democrat. It's very clear in the numbers. And so the Democratic Party has the same incentives as does Hinge or Tinder or Bustle or Bumble or whatever it is. They want people to keep on being bitter and lonely because that feeds their demographics. It's that simple. And once the Democrats get back into power, this is as far as it's ever going to get. The apparatus of the mainstream is still firmly in the hands of the cathedral, as is the educational institutions. And there's no way that I can. Okay, sure. We got this idea from the fever swamps of the internet to the point where it's being discussed by ex-athletes and professional journalists and pretty young girls who aspire to be professional journalists, who I'm sure are very nice. I don't see where it goes after that. The people who could plausibly do something about it are all in charge of social media that is used by women. The second they push back on any of these delusions, the second that we propose at any level that we reduce the optionality of women, and unfortunately, the reality of these problems is there is no solution to the dating crisis, the gender war, that does not at some level reduce the optionality of women in some way, either through dating prospects, dating optionality, in terms of divorce optionality, in terms of birth control optionality, in terms of internet optionality. Those options have to be taken off the table for women because inside female circles, a certain kind of thing always wins. A certain kind of behavior always wins. And the kind of behavior that wins in female circles is Sabrina Carpenter, is Billie Eilish. And I don't want to pigeonhole these people. These are artists that I have not really listened to. I did like Billie Eilish's Ocean Eyes that premiered just when my son was being born, I believe. Just when I kind of permanently stopped listening to new music. It happens to dads a lot for some reason. You disconnect a little bit in your 20s and then a lot when you become a father. And it's a good song. It's an earworm. It's catchy. But let's be honest, a large part about what makes Billie Eilish and Sabrina Carpenter things for women is they channel this certain perspective. And the certain perspective is, I'm a girl and boys are icky. Boys are useless. Let's turn performative man-hating into kind of a thing in female circles because we don't want them to tell us what to do. This is the archetype that wins in female circles because you get to show yourself. And what loses in female circles is their favorite insults, and that is a pick-me. It's funny, we go back to this. Again, I'm doing the slides out of order here, so forgive me. We go back to this event that I've talked about many times before, like the Great Foyer Defection of 2024, a very interesting sociological phenomenon that in late 2023 to basically the beginning of 2025, basically the election year of the period that we would consider the election and its aftermath. In American circles, and that's how we measure things, by how close or far they are from American electoral cycle. I think the rest of the world does that too. I hate to say it, guys. You kind of revolve around us. I know that. The followers of Dugan, that will get me. It will get me. My N-word credentials will all be exposed as being a N-word with white skin by pointing out the fact that everyone revolves around American electoral politics. But I'm sorry, you guys do, even if you live in Romania. As tragic as that might be. This has been, obviously I was kind of involved in this since I knew a lot of these women who defected. And, sure enough, the beginning and end of this was very, very predictable. The beginning of it was immediately, out of nowhere, this eruption of disapprobation from about 5 media accounts. I won't mention any of them because they're all writing under pseudonyms now. But, well, maybe I'll mention one. Lauren Southern was one of them, obviously. She got magically appeared in an election year to sabotage the right wing. And it's amazing how that works, isn't it? It's like magic. She picked the year out of a hat. But what happened is all of these women what made it interesting, and it's not interesting, like, who cares about these people? They've been gone for years anyway, right? But it's interesting psychologically how it occurred. And it occurred because, well, I'll get into that. Let's describe what happened first. Sometime around 2023, in the summer of 2023, there was this giant eruption of discontent from these female circles. After they had been writing articles and falling over themselves to get interviews with people on the right, everything just fell apart and they started getting super angry. And no matter what you did, they would just get angry. If you supported them, if you pointed out that they were angry, they get angry at you even more. If you tried to defend yourself, they would get angry. If you tried to argue your case, they get angry. The only response that was accepted as being not an aggressive attack on them was to validate their perspectives and their complaints and tell them they were right to feel this way and that they should double down on it. Now, of course, I was willing to do anything. I wrote an article about the dissident right and why, its ideas were going to be eternal. That was in early 2024. So it was a year after the initial defection began in late 23. It was 6 months after the original defection began in late 2023. I write a defense of it, like in very neutral language, about why the ideas of the dissident right are valuable. No one reads it. No one wants to discuss it in this group. Of course they don't, right? And I try to talk to people and get them to come down and, okay, I sympathize with the fact that you're getting attacked by trolls. No one's having any of it. The question is what happened? And obviously, you don't know what happens in people's minds, but I have an idea. I think everybody knew. If you talk to other women and you know how women work, this is what went down. This is what went down. So these girls, these women who were writing these articles were all in group chats together. That is obviously what occurred. And one of them had a negative experience with trolls. There might have been bad actors in there, like Lauren Southern, people who are actively trying to sabotage the movement. So another one's Radfem Hitler. I don't know if these group chats actually exist, but all women are in group chats, right? So you have 2 bad actors. Let's call them Laura and Radfem, right? They're in the chat. And all they do is they just feed grievances into the chat about how women are getting victimized by right-wing men. They're just introduced neutrally. They're like, those people out there are victimizing us in here. And they do this again and again and again and again and again. And eventually the narrative becomes, how do we support ourselves against victimization by men, well, in this case, by right-wing men. Now, does it matter that these people are all anonymous accounts? No. Does it matter that the harassment they're getting is the same kind of harassment that Will Martin throws at me every time I log on to Substack? Every time I log on to Substack, it's this stream of expletives about how I'm Baptile-controlled N-word, F-word, N-word, F-word, and a giant stream down. What does this guy never sleep? He comes after me day and night. And he's not the only one. there's like 1,000 more just like that. And I'm not even counting the people who constantly try to get me to defect and denounce either Academic Agent or Orrin McIntyre. It's always those two guys. Before that, it used to be Academic Agent and Endeavor, who's another great podcaster and YouTuber. I think he does it a little bit less than he used to, but I recently saw him on a podcast, so he's still in the game. But they always go after the same ones. This is the game. This is how it's done. People are going to come after you, and when you refuse to denounce your friends, they call you names, blah 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 blah. That you're a Fed, you're this, you're that, whatever. This gets fed into a female group chat, though, about how people are being victimized. Suddenly, being a victim of right-wing trolls is suddenly a high-status thing to be. And counter-signaling it and trying to get people to calm down is suddenly a low-status thing to be. And it amps up from there. So what happens is that these women kind of psyop themselves into believing that the biggest crisis of our time was the scourge of right-wing trolls. It isn't the war in Ukraine. It isn't the threats that come from technology that we're seeing every day. It isn't the possibility of another outbreak. It isn't mass migration. It isn't rising crime rates. It isn't any of the things that we ordinarily talk about on the right wing that the mainstream largely ignores. The big problem is people being mean to women online. Is it rational? No. But inside a group chat, it always wins. It always wins. There is no status to be gained in a group chat for arguing against the victim. And the victimizer is always on the outside of the group chat. And since these group chats are all monogender, the villain is always men. And so, what happens, and you've had people like Peachy Keenan. She was on the podcast of Deadly New Right about a month ago talking about this. Basically, half of them just accused the other half of being pick-mes and kicked him out. And what remained was just this self-validating, self-licking ice cream cone, no pun intended, of women who were just convincing themselves that they had to go on a crusade against the right wing generally, to the point where they completely destroyed their online careers blogging. And they're still publishing articles with the New York Times and with the New York Magazine and with the Know Your Enemy podcast about how bad their contact with right-wing trolls was 3 years ago. 3 years ago. Think of all the things that happened in 3 years that you care about. No, it's your interactions with right-wing trolls in 2023. That has to be the only thing that you talk about politically for the rest of your life. It's a shame. Imagine if you believe that your movement actually had a cause that it was fighting for that needed to be accomplished. Imagine if you believed that. Imagine if your blog was an actual company and people relied on it continuing. Imagine if talking about relevant political ideas rather than personal dramas was something that you actually cared about pursuing. All of those objectives, pursuing political ends, keeping your business going, actually developing ideas outside of personal grievances, all of those objectives immediately get tossed right into the ocean of who cares the second the accusation of Me Tooism comes into play. And there's a perfect article about this on Substack. I'm not going to read this, but the person who wrote it, he has some Cyrillic name that I can't pronounce, so I won't even try. It's not Kryptos. It's not Kryptos, but it's a similarly unpronounceable Cyrillic name, so I'm not going to try pronouncing it. And the thesis of the article was essentially that when you regard women who are doing right-wing politics, you are encountering women who are operating in a way that is radically disaligned to their fundamental nature. Ordinary women do not enter non-mainstream places to play politics with strange men that they do not know. This is not an ordinary female behavior. And so naturally, through the lens of medieval medicine or Aristotelian-inspired medicine, we have to perceive these women as suffering from some kind of critical defect of the humors, right? So you've got sanguine, phlegmatic, um, choleric, and melancholic. And he has the picture here is the personification of it. You've got the choleric, which is the unstable extrovert, right? And the unstable extrovert is just like the e-girl who wants to capitalize on chaos and get clout for herself, the Lauren Southern types, right? Then you've got like the sanguine, which is the expert, the stable extrovert. She's kind of like, she is here because her husband is here or because someone offered her a lucrative gig, but she's extroverted, but she does not want to seem like a bad person. You've got kind of the introvert who is stable, the phlegmatic type, who's kind of the professor who wants to recede in the background and just discuss ideas. Think of like Aiden Paladin for this one. And then like you've got the unstable introvert, the melancholics, right? The Emily Eucases of the world, the kind of crazy 4chan dwelling females, maybe some of the Murdoch Chan types there. And this is the thing. Unfortunately, none of these women can sustain themselves outside of this realm. Eventually, they'll all come back to original position. And the original position of all women is that women have no agency to fix problems by limiting the rights or optionality of other women. The optionality of women cannot be contracted by an action that we recommend as women. That is a rock solid rule. And so since obviously, no solution to the gender dating crisis can be accomplished without some limitation of female optionality, either again, socially, internet-wise, sexually, or politically. What they're essentially telling us through their actions is that all of these actions will have to come almost through completely male political movements. It is a futile gesture to begin with. Leadership is needed. But what leadership is there to have? I guess this kind of takes me back to the supreme vagueness of our moment in terms of politicians. I heard that our good friend Vivek Ramaswamy won in Ohio, much to my chagrin. I consider this person to be one of the most dangerous, pernicious politicians of our generation. He's quite a snake, in my opinion. And I feel kind of like a lot of these scam artists. I named this Canons and Contradictions, this podcast, after the scam that was run in Morgan Stanley, where this Indian guy alleged that he had this interaction where his female superior raped him. And this is the funniest shit you'll ever see. And again, this is why I don't delete Twitter, even though discourse is dead and there's no real reason for me to be there. This guy, he starts talking about this young, attractive woman. She forced herself on me by feeding me Viagra, and she said that I was a fish-headed Asian, and my wife was a fish-headed Asian. And then she said things like, I bet she doesn't have these cannons. It's just like, you can just imagine this interaction where this young blonde, this happens all the time, guys, right? This happens all the time. Indian guys are walking down the street, unperturbed. And then they get ambushed by these attractive young blonde women who flash them their tits and say, look at these cannons. And then tackle them to the ground. I guess that's the one accurate part of the story. They're able to tackle these guys to the ground, force them to take erection drugs, and then straddle them, all the while denouncing them as being fish-headed Asians. Leave aside that no American calls Indians Asians. That's a British thing. That's something that Europeans do. And no American woman calls her boobs, which is like the American terminology, or tits if you want to be a little bit more transatlantic with your slang. Nobody calls those things cannons. That's not like believable. And so, and look, and the guy who made up this lie, he must have known this. He didn't even write his own lies. He had ChatGPT write this lie. I think this literally came out. Like it's not that that he's lying to me. I mean, I could have probably guessed he was lying to him. What's the probability that of all of the female on male rapes, it's an attractive white woman raping a diminutive Indian man? The only thing that makes sense about that interaction is the ability of the white woman to overpower the guy. Other than that, I mean, it's just, but the problem is it's not even believable. He did zero anthropological research on his audience. He didn't even check the stuff when it came out of GPT. And so it's just like it's you're getting fed these lies by these people. And Vivek Ramaswamy is this the perfect example of this. At the beginning of his campaign, he was so good at telling people what they wanted to hear. He was so good at this. He was so good at saying the exact right thing. I mean, I've heard rumors, and I'm guessing, don't take this to the bank, but I've heard rumors that he basically had one of our guys working on the inside of his writing room. People who had read the paleocons, people that were, who had read Curtis Yarvin and this and that. And he had a friend or someone he hired was on the inside of his writing room, writing his talking points so that he could say the exact right things to sound like some combination of a highbrow, distant right intellectual and somebody who was an electable version of Trump. But then in 2024, during Christmas, no less, I guess he fired the guy that used to write his speeches, and he just had ChatGPT write his speeches based on what ChatGPT thought a hypothetical American voter would vote for. And this gave him classics like, we need to have, Americans don't work enough. I'm going to lecture Americans about not grinding at the office during the one day of the year that is their sacred day off holiday that Indians don't share. The worst possible time to give this, you got to put your nose to the grindstone or Asians are going to eat your lunch. Yeah, let's do that on Christmas Day. That's perfect, Vivek. Did ChatGPT tell you to do that? That's a brilliant campaign manager move. Like just lecture people about how they should be at the office on Christmas, like Ebenezer Scrooge did to what was it? To Crockett. What was who's the first name of Crockett? And that is Peter Crockett. I can't remember. It's like, how dare you not work on Christmas Day? I'm not going to give you coal. You're competing with China. China doesn't give their workers any days off on blah, 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 blah. At the very moment, I mean, white America has been grinding its sons and daughters into the corporate workforce for the better part of 2 decades. And the people who ground the hardest into that work were not the most brilliantly rewarded. And it didn't take that long to just do a deep dive on Vivek Ramaswamy's history and learn that he entirely resembles that description. Did Vivek Ramaswamy get where he was by just doing nothing but studying all the time, by not watching TV, by not playing sports, by not having by not doing art? He just dropped all his electives and did pure AP classes. He was at the lab 24/7. He skipped sleep. He skipped everything just to get that little bit more juice out of his engineering GP. No, he didn't fucking do that. He didn't fucking do that at all. He got to be a businessman by hopping on an IP scam from a medical technology that he didn't invent. His entire list of accomplishments is one long chain of nepotisms from one end to the other. That's his thing. That's what he is famous for doing. It's one long scam. I mean, he doesn't really believe that, but he doubles down on this. He triples down on this. He can never answer any of the follow-up questions. For 1 year, he destroys his entire personality, smirking into the camera while he's telling us this stuff. And then, just before this election, and something that, if I had any faith in the boomers, this should have sank him. He goes up to Ohioan Christians and feeds them the oldest pagan trick in the book. This is This is the oldest religious scam in the book. And look, I've heard this from I've heard this from European Viking style pagan bros, and I've heard this from European style med Greek pagan bros with the bodybuilding. Now I've heard this trick too. And I just want you to know, all you pagan bros, when you do this, what you're reminding me of is Indian scammers. Just so you don't ever do this to a Christian, okay? I'm not saying that you have to convert to Christianity. I respect people's religions. That's fine. I respect real belief. I am a little bit skeptical that paganism is anything other than implicit racial loyalty. I don't think that Vivek Ramaswamy actually believes that there's a literal Vishnu in charge of the universe. Just like I don't think that most pagan guys think that there is a literal Odin or a literal Freya or, Sif or whatever, or that there are actual Juten trolls or stuff like that. Look, for Platonists, I basically am a Platonist, so I can't throw too much shade. I'm only not a Platonist insofar as I have followed it to its natural completion in what I say to be the logos of Christ. But that being said, I think it's mostly a religion that suffers from lacking rather than anything that's deficient about it. But look, I respect belief, and if you actually do believe in Ganesha and Vishnu, I want to highly respect that. That's fine. That is and we'll say you believe in your gods, we believe in God. Or if you want to say our God, if you want to make it possessive or singular, you can say that, but whatever you do, don't do this. I mean, look, you can do it, and we're going to tell you to fuck off, because Christians have been telling pagans to fuck off when they did this for the last 2,000 years. It's not a controversial thing. This is one of the most historically documented dialogues of all Western history. I don't know why we're repeating this. I don't know why I have to repeat this. I guess I'm a little bit less surprised when it comes from Indians, but I heard it come from Europeans, so let's not make this ethnic at all. And this is how the dialogue goes. Gee, guys. Gee, isn't Jesus just like Ganesha? Isn't Jesus just like Vishnu? I mean, Jesus said he was the way to God, but is he the only way? And when you really think about it, aren't there all just different ways to God? And isn't everyone's God just kind of like the other ones? I got an idea. How about you worship our gods a little bit, and we'll worship your gods a little bit, and then we'll all be happy and unified. No, fuck off. Fuck off. Fuck off. That is not how monotheism works. Do you have any self-awareness? Do you have any self-awareness right now? Do you have any self-awareness? Like that when you're telling me this bullshit about how we'll exchange gods, or we'll have them on an equal level, or they're all different routes to the same divinity, that is not how monotheists see their faith, and they see that tact as an insult. They see that tact as an insult. Oh, that means you think you're better than us. Yes. Look, I mean, I don't see myself as personally better than you, but there is no comparison of God to gods. These are different types of things. And the invitation to conflate the two things is like inviting me to use your pronouns. You're inviting me to linguistically embrace the equivocation of two obviously separate things so that I can, in this moment, not offend you. And then you're trying to hover politeness. You're trying to dangle politeness in front of my face, thinking that the Christian obligation to politeness is going to get me to concede that God is no different from the God pantheon that you worship. And even if I acknowledge that these were prefigurations of Nephilim or angels, even if they believe that these things were essentially prefigured angels and not outright demons, and looking at a lot of Hindu worship, it's really hard not to believe that these things aren't demonic, but I'm not going to get into that. Even if I did say that these were prefigurations of the divine, as something like Athena would be to the Virgin Mary or something like that, even then, the conflation of God to gods in that form would still be a sacrilegious expression on my part, and you're essentially trying to bait me into making that. You think that I'm so stupid that I'm going to say something that is expressly against my religion because like you just like pulled a fast one over me. Like you used the right language, and I got Dave to denounce his own Christian faith. I got Dave to make the concession that thousands of Christian martyrs went to their deaths to defend because I like spun a story really quickly. I had a little hat trick with the language. Here's God, here's Vishnu, here's God, here's Vishnu. Oh, which had sender, which said, you denounced your faith. Like it's a trick. It's obviously a trick. I know what the trick is. I know where you're headed with this trick. The answer is no. You know that the answer is no to this question. You know that the answer is no to this question. How could you know? Do you not know history? Do you not know how this conversation went between the Roman authorities and early Christian martyrs? Are you unaware of this aspect of Western history? And I hate this question so much. I have had friends that I deeply respect, and they try to do this, and I have to restrain myself not from punching them. It's not because it's so. I mean, it is a little bit because it's sacrilegious. I mean, it is like asking Christians to conflate God with gods is heavily sacrilegious for a Christian. But that's not why I feel like punching them. I feel like punching them because they must think that I am a fucking idiot. They must think that I'm a moron. The fact that they're telling me this, and they think that I don't know history. They think that this is the exact question that Christians are taught that they should go to their deaths to deny rather than accept. And you think that I'm going to accept this because I'm stupid or lazy or you pulled some kind of like con on me. And I consider it absolutely insulting. But I'm fine with kind of respecting paganism as a religion. Like I respect the belief, okay? I'll respect that. I certainly might respect you as a blood, as kin by blood, or as a co-loyalist in a common movement for the future of our children. That's a possibility. Let's forge a relationship there. But when you come up to someone and say, "Well, God, isn't Vishnu also a way to God? And isn't Jesus also a way to God? And aren't I kind of like a Christian in that regard?" And fucking Vivek Ramaswamy, right before the election, he does this routine. He goes with these evangelicals and he does the same fucking routine. Oh my God, aren't my gods kind of like your gods? When you really think about it, isn't that the case? And I thank God the guy told him to go soak his head. I mean, thank God he said that. But then 3 days later, an entirely Christian Ohio Republican primary electorate fucking elected the guy. What's going on? Is there any seriousness left in this conversation? I'm sorry, I'm yelling into the microphone. I just can't with this. I just can't with Vivek. Great. I mean, while you vote for Vivek, why don't you just hand your children's college fund over to Indian scammers? Not that anyone's going to college anymore, but you know that would be an equally. You would get me to respect your ability to manage anything much better than that. I thought after COVID there were enough. I guess there's just so many boomers. I mean, probably what the thing is that there are just a lot of boomers that just vote party line and they vote for name recognition, and no one really votes in primary elections anyway. And it was an unusual time to hold the primary vote. I mean, it's the middle of May. It's, people are getting lazy. Probably very few young people voted for this, but you still gave this person power after he expressly disparaged your religion. He either disparaged it because he was stupid. He either disparaged Christianity because he was so stupid he didn't know, in which case he's not qualified, or he disparaged his religion because he did know and he thought you were too dumb to understand it, which is probably what actually is going on. People think that Republican Christians in this country are dumb, and I mean that's why this scam is going on. And boy, do we live up to the stereotype. And I'm not even evangelical. Like I said before, the internet just you just you just look for where the adults are in the room, and you can't see them. In the last few weeks, I've been trying to find the adults in the room, and I've been kind of giving a look back at the lib side of things, and it's just it is quite a tale. I'm trying to look for this person's name, and I'm drawing a blank. Hold on. It is Ryan Holiday. So, interestingly enough, I look back on the libs of my generation. I am a older millennial. I'm an older millennial born in the 80s. I have a graying beard here, you can see. I finally got a haircut, thank God. I was looking really scraggly back there for a moment, but whatever. But I want to see kind of what other older millennials are doing on the other side of the political divide. I mean, certainly they must be thinking about getting serious about things. I remember my colleagues from high school. We weren't. We were kind of crazy, but we still cared about the future. We still wanted to have children, didn't we? I guess the first thing is Seth Rogen. Two things. Trying to sell a new weed dispensary. He invented a bowl for smoking joints. And so I watched this guy he busts out this ceramic concoction that's supposed to be the best way to roll joints. And the guy is 40. I've complained about this guy forever. He looks 50 or 60. He looks 10 years older than me. And I don't think he is. I don't think he's 10 years older than me. He looks 10 years older than me by a long shot. And this guy is a professional actor. This guy is somebody who has a personal trainer. This guy is somebody who sells his face on television. He looks 10 years older than he is. And he's here selling people weed and acting like this is like a cool thing. This is a cool thing to do when you're 40, 50. And also trying to sell people that you don't need to have children. Life without children is great, he says. I mean, how do I even know who Seth Rogen is? Well, you see, Seth Rogen starred in a series of Judd Apatow movies. And Judd Apatow was a director from the late 90s who did this show called Freaks and Geeks, that was really Freaks and Geeks has the distinction of being the first sort of self-consciously millennial show. It's up there with Daria. As a matter of fact, kind of ironically enough, both Daria and Freaks and Geeks have kind of the same characters involved. The main character of Freaks and Geeks was this brunette girl who wore a green canvas jacket, right? And Daria is the girl who wore a green canvas jacket. There was a girl who wore a green canvas jacket in my high school too. Did they in the late 90s, early 2000s? Did they just like standard issue these girls? And they were with the pot smokers too, right? This was a thing, and they always had kind of like they're very, very contemplative. They're very meditative about the world and the things that were in it, and very dark, but also very positive, whatever. But this is the first. Judd Apatow was the first director who's like, I'm gonna take the millennial experience seriously. And so he did a variety of movies. I think he did the 40-year-old version. He did Superbad. And he did Knocked Up, which is, of course, where everyone remembers Seth Rogen from. Now, look, the plot of any Judd Apatow movie is more or less the same. The plot is basically millennials are a bunch of fuck-up man children, or in some rare cases, female children who they just can't grow up. They just can't grow up. But if we just chill out about life, the world, politics, if we just chill out and be real and come through with each other, if we just focus on not being assholes, eventually life will just catch up with us. Eventually life will, you'll be forced to be an adult. Adulthood will just happen to you. And that was the point of Knocked Up, right? Like total loser knocks up this beautiful woman, and then he decides to go through with it and have the kid, and in the process grow up and get off weed. So it's like the opposite of what actually happened to Seth Rogen in real life. In real life, he never grew up. And in real life, he's a multimillionaire. I just can't get over that. I just can't get, what is his internal narrative? What is the internal narrative of anybody who watches Seth Rogen? That he's a less admirable person of the people that he played on TV, who were designed to be not admirable people. But even that's not quite as bad as Ryan Holiday. This is the other person. He was on a talk show the other day talking about how we can inculcate good liberal values into our children. You know, liberals are realizing that they're not having very many children, and that there's no real plan to impart their values beyond just like the insane ideology that's in university. How do we impart liberal values to our children? Well, guess what? We're just going to have television teach them that. Yes. The show Ted Lasso, as it happens, which is a shit libby Judd Apatow type show, although, with a British context, that's going to teach us how our children should have the ethics of Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg ethics, the ethics of television, the ethics of Stephen Colbert. The problem with Steve Buttigieg and Stephen Colbert ethics is that they only work in the modern world if you're filthy fucking rich. And in the case of Seth Rogen, even if you are filthy rich, they still don't work. He has millions of dollars, and he's using that money to sell like Billy Mays style like scam products, but for weed. Because weed used to be illegal in most states. I don't know, it's probably still illegal in about half of them. And no one enforces it. Because weed is legal in most states, what used to be illegal in most states 15 years ago. That means like selling people scam made for television products is like cool somehow. But my favorite thing is Ryan Holiday, because Ryan Holiday is this guy, and he's like, oh, I'm a skeptic. I'm a skeptic. I'm both a skeptic and a cynic. A cynic like Diogenes, a Sinope, and like a stoic like Marcus Aurelius, and or Seneca, or half a dozen other philosophers of Stoicism, like the same ones you read with introductory quiz. And then Stoicism is the philosophy that I adopted halfway in between just being like a total atheist and rediscovering Plato and all this stuff. It's the easiest philosophy to, look, if you were to understand Stoics in their time, this would not be an easy philosophy to adhere to at all. Stoicism is the absolute fucking easiest philosophy in the entire world to embrace at a dinner party. It is so fucking easy because all of the writers of Stoicism focus the direction of morality almost entirely on the self, the inner light. The inner light is, that's a Quaker concept, right? So, you can kind of see the Quakers get it from like Gnostic sources, the Gnostics get it from Stoics, but the idea is that like a fragment of God or the eternal divine being exists inside the self. And the Stoics are there to cultivate the beauty of that divinity that is inside ourselves, and to feed it forward into the world, to make sure that it is realized, that it is going to blossom forward into good acts. That this is how Stoics write, and you can just see how this is like catnip for shitlibs, right? It is such bait, because it is so easy to read Stoics and not really understand them. So in the video I saw of Ryan Holiday right after the one where he recommended people learn their kids should be taught ethics through cable television, you have him give like a tour of his bookstore, of his handmade bookstore, And it's like it looks like my father owned a used bookstore. I have experience working in used bookstores for years. I know my way around a used bookstore, right? But this looks like every like boutique seaside bookstore with like, it's a super open space. Like there's two types of bookstores. The one is like rows of books everywhere, and you have to dig around places to find things, and everything's really disorganized, and there's boxes of books on the floor. That's like an actual used bookstore. Then there's the bookstores where it's like most of the space is just tables and like breezy areas for people to walk in and out with drinks, and it all has the same penguin editions of all of the translations on the wall, and like half of them are in plastic because like no one fucking reads them. Like this is a bookstore. Like who flips through books in bookstores? That's not the point. The point is to have like a pristine condition penguin classic version of Seneca, and you take it out of the plastic and you put it on your shelf and you never fucking read it. Like no one fucking wants to go through books in bookstores. That's not what bookstores are for. Bookstores are for being seen in bookstores. And so Ryan Holiday, who again, he looks plastic to me. He's like impossibly thin. He must be on Ozempic because he has this like skinny, no muscle thing, but like you can still see his bones in his arms. It's bizarre. I don't know. It must be Ozempic or something. Either that or he's like in track or field or something like that. Some really leaning cardio sport that has no muscular component. But when he talks, his mouth just moves like this. Like his whole face has been like, stretched or something. Like he speaks like some kind of weird android character. And I just listened to him. This woman comes into his shop and asks for good books. And it turns out this woman is a professor of classics. Like she's an expert on this stuff. And they talk for 20 minutes and they have nothing original to say. All they have is just like reference, like, oh, do you remember when? Diogenes spoke to Alexander? Oh yeah, I remember that too. From Plutarch. Oh, do you remember when this person said this about this? Oh yeah. And then the typical handwriting, and doesn't that really reflect on our times? Doesn't that really reflect on our times? Yeah, of course. The opinions that Seneca had about Alexander the Great really reflect on your times. And you just know from listening to people talk, they rehearse the same number of books and the same observations about those books that I learned about those books in undergrad. It's the same ones. And these people are in their 40s. These people are my age. And they're paid to do this. This is their number one job. Their number one job is to know and teach these books. And they recycle the same 20 quotes and little anecdotes that you'd get in an undergraduate seminar. Okay, I guess this is a performance. Probably this woman relates these same stories when she's teaching the course because it's like they're in her notes. They're probably in her teaching guide. But she's not organically reading this and then meditating on it and excerpting things that aren't the typical things that are talked about when we talk about these authors. Moreover, she's anachronistically superimposing these political conflicts onto our modern era politics. I know for a fact that these people do not habitually read these things in a spirit of curiosity. And the reason why I know this is I know that these people could not answer hypotheticals about these books. That sounds like a really arbitrary criticism. You can't answer hypotheticals. Trolley. Wait for your philosophical trolley problem. But I mean, kind of. Don't you need to be able to do that? When we talk about characters in their time, I know I've mentioned this book multiple times, but it's a book that I'm kind of nursing and making my way through because it's so absolutely thick. It is a biography of the poet Robert Burns by alternative famous Scotsman, our favorite Thomas Carlyle. Talk about wordy. And in the most important passage that I haven't really gotten, to be truth be told, I haven't really gotten anything out of the biography that Carlyle wrote, but I've been able to get endless stuff out of the introduction, which is written for students. And the schoolmaster who published this compilation says, Whenever you read a piece of biography or philosopher by great men, you need to be able to feel like you know the person. You need to read it and reread it and reread it until it feels like you know the person who's speaking. These two great men, and they considered Carlyle a great man at that time, Robert Burns and Thomas Carlyle. He says they form the English language as we speak it. Thomas Carlyle obviously didn't form the English language that we currently speak because he borderline sounds like he's not speaking English in his writings. But no, he was influential at the time. And Robert Burns, obviously, I don't think many people know Robert Burns songs consciously, but they certainly subconsciously know a bunch of them. He's responsible for a lot of the folk songbooks we know right now, most popular, which is Auld Lang Syne. A very, very famous poet and composer. And that's what you should strive for. These people couldn't. Okay, let's say that you are in Greece at the time of Alexander, and you are meeting Diogenes right before he meets Alexander the Great, and then you talk to Alexander the Great. What's your opinion on Alexander the Great? Is he wrong-headed? Should he not take on his historical task to unify the world in the Persian campaign? Should he not redesign things in his image? Is the lesson to stay at home and to focus on the self? Are all political affairs kind of doomed to collapse under their own weight? If so, why do you care so much about getting the Democrats elected? Are they somehow the one party that's immune for this eternal political corruption that Diogenes talked about? They have no answers to these things. They have absolutely no answer to these things. And what's even amazing is that this literature professor, they're going through the books, this literature professor who teaches as a professor, they teach philosophy as a professor. They don't know who Ambrose Bierce is. One of the most celebrated cynics, one of the most celebrated essayists, one of the most celebrated short story writers, one of the most infamous disappearances of the 20th century. And I don't know who Ambrose Bierce is. I know who Ambrose Bierce is. And I'm an engineer. I knew who Ambrose Bierce was in high school. These people do not engage with this stuff for fun. They engage with this material so they know just the certain number of things so that they can talk about them in front of a camera and line up the books in this nice little line and pose in front of it with their Ozempic face. Oh my God, aren't I deep? Isn't Trump really, really bad news, guys? I've been trying to figure out one thing. I can't seem to figure this out. Is the left weak or strong? Is the left weak or strong? I can't seem to figure this out. On one hand, they still have all the institutions. They have, if you're a leftist and you can't organize people in this day and age with what's going on economically right now, you suck. This is the perfect environment for which a leftist could recruit young people to their cause. And even so, they still can't do it. They still can't do it. It's like something is broken inside of them. Well, I can't even really figure out what the left is. I will say this. This is, the left should be winning right now. Oh, I'm sweating. Apologize for flashing you guys that. I am absolutely sweating. It is infernal in here, and I apologize. But it is undeniable that as hot as it is in here, the left is absolutely winning. Trump's administration is turning out to be a disaster. He's unable to punish his enemies after the first 100 days. And I have to say, I don't see how he's really taken control over this country in the wake of the Charlie Kirk assassination. There's this famous tweet from Matt Yglesias. He tweeted this in 2021, just after the January 6th protests, when Trump was kicked off of Twitter and presumably exiled from public life. And he says it's kind of weird that deplatforming Trump just like completely worked with no visible downside whatsoever. Sure. Um, but is kind of weird. It's kind of weird that shooting Charlie Kirk for the left just kind of completely worked with no visible downside whatsoever. It's kind of like the leftists did that and they suffered absolutely no consequence. They suffered absolutely no consequence for that. And the guys being charged, I I mean, was it a conspiracy? Uh yes and no. It wasn't a conspiracy in the sense that I don't think anyone materially set up the shooting other than the guy that they got. I will believe that. Do you remember perchance Charlottesville? Do you remember what happened in Charlottesville? A bunch of right wingers got together for a protest due to the tearing down of statues. Then, this guy called James Field was mobbed and he started up his car. And from what I can see of the footage, it looks like he accidentally ran into the crowd and killed a woman. From that one instant of death that looked accidental, but again, I will defer if there's more forensic knowledge. I certainly did not see any proof of intention that came up during his trial. But based on that one murder or death, they were able to arrest everybody. They were able to get criminal records on everybody who was in that crowd. Everybody. They went after every single person. One of Trump's personal friends get his head blown off, and the left is feeling zero pressure. Nobody got arrested other than the guy who literally pulled the trigger. That's power. That's power, and you can't convince me that the left doesn't have it. But them having power, it doesn't appear that they can hold on to it at all. I'm looking right now at the California midterm elections, in which we have just some of the most egregious people ever. Now, I can't believe I live in the state again. You have Katie Porter, who is this, she looks like Professor Umbridge from Harry Potter. She acts like Professor Umbridge from Harry Potter. She's pretentious. She's narcissistic. She cuts people off. She thinks she's smart and she sounds like a moron. And she's every one of the worst stereotypes of the self-assured, over-promoted Gen X girl boss, political girl boss. And I guess she's going to be our next governor, maybe. I don't know. I can't believe it. We'll see. In the meantime, we have the LA, and this is kind of interesting. You have Zoran Mamdani, was it Nitya Raman or whatever? It's like one of these socialists, Zoran Mamdani types. It's just amazing how many South Asians are running for high office, despite being a minuscule percentage of the population. A minuscule percentage of the population, and they're already dominating electoral politics. Dominating electoral politics in this country. One of them is a status quo. I want to be your best technocrat. I'm going to make everyone happy. I'm a box ticker, and I'm smarter than you, even while she puts her foot in her mouth. Turbo narcissist. That describes half the people in the white Democratic Party. The other one is obviously somewhere between an outright revolutionary, but, let's be honest, not really. More just an ethnic grifter. This is a person that is locked in to enhancing her own prospects and the prospects of her group at the expense of the white population of America and of the state. That is what is going on here. These are the visions that rule the Democratic Party in my state. And they're obviously not the same thing. They're not the same thing. I'm reminded of this satire of World War One. I can't remember, like the Jack of Hearts or something like that. It was, it's about these crazy people who are witnessing trench warfare from the outside or whatnot. And the last scene, the two armies are parading around town, and they're able to like exactly miss each other in their marching formations when they're looking for each other. So they completely march through the town and are unaware of the other person's presence, even though like they're marching in formation with like trumpets blaring and all that stuff, thinking that they had conquered this town and taken it from the other person. Uh, that is kind of how I see the Democrat Party. You've got this radical wing and you've got this technocratic wing. And they're marching around claiming that they're fighting for the same cause, that they're on the same side of democracy, that they want the same diverse future. And they're absolutely not fighting for the same future. There's just nothing that they could possibly go for or get. Uh, I don't know. It's impossible to determine whether the left is weak or strong. This is something that it's one of these constant uh, paradoxes, right? It's like an Escher painting. Uh, they have the power, they can't lead. It's like they're in this supreme feminine. It's and again, to bring it back to the endless gender slop debates. It's they've centralized all the power in this supremely feminine apparatus that can only drain things away from anyone who would actually do anything or create rules or create regulations or create order. So everything just kind of goes to greater and greater and greater chaos. And so you've got like these two parties of the Democratic Party. It's like the people from Warhammer. They're competing to see who can spread chaos the fastest. And you've got kind of like, the blood for the blood god radicals like Zoran Mamdani. Like they just want to go straight for the throat right now. And then you've got kind of the Nurgle and Zinch chaos followers like Katie Porter. We're gonna spread chaos subtly through corruption, through spiritual corrosion, and it is a sight to see. And where does that lead us on? Where does that leave us altogether as the people who want to oppose this? The Trump administration is basically over at this stage. What Trump is effectively a lame duck until for 3 more years. I don't think anything else major is going to happen. I mean, he's got a few months until the primaries, and if he can't resolve the Iran war by then, he's going to lose hard. And even if he does resolve the Iran war by then, he's going to lose hard. And then from that moment out, no change is going to occur. So what are we talking about when we look at the future of people who actually don't want to have their state burned down by lunatics like this, who don't want to be ruled by scammers or man children or people who are pushing a social media portfolio? Really, I think it just comes down to seeing if there is a way out of the frame of the 20th century. There is a debate going on between people like Aaron McIntyre and others about whether they could be a left-right coalition. This is another one of those stupid debates where, it's productive to have this conversation, even though the answer is obvious. Like, will they put the woke away? Well, that answer is both yes or no, depending on what you mean by put the woke away and depending on who you mean by whom. And, obviously the answer is a little bit of both. And the same thing is true for the question of whether the right can ally with the left. The answer obviously is no. The left in the modern world is defined by the destruction of our group and our religion. That's the only thing keeping the left-wing coalition together is that they agree that we're the worst people ever and we need to be punished and we need to be dispossessed so they can feed more money and resources to their client groups. That is what the left is right now. And you can't ally with people whose only self-definition is that they want to destroy you. That being said, eventually there's going to be a fracturing of this anti-white, anti-Christian, anti-order coalition, in which case the definition of the left will start to fragment. And in that fragmentation, it's important for the right to absorb the best parts of the left and to redefine what it means to be part of the future, to be, for lack of a better word, cool. This is something that I know Connor Tomlinson was talking about a lot on his podcast this morning. I assume it was at night for him. And he was talking about, some podcasts that both Arn and I had done about how all culture today just seems totally drained away and empty. And like you see these people, and this picture here comes from the Met Gala here. You see these people and they're at this snazzy party for all of the bigwigs in New York City. This is sort of the lifestyles of the rich and famous that everyone's supposed to see on television and really feel envious about. Do you feel envious that you're not part of this crowd that you're seeing right here? Do you want to hang out with these people at all? These people they look like high schoolers. They look like high schoolers who've OD'd on Ozempic. They look unhealthy. They look diseased. They look fake. And these people will never accomplish anything. They're just trying to climb a ladder. They're just trying to climb the ladder of chaos. They have no plans for their future beyond the clout they can get for being in the room with other people that have clout. That's not cool. I'm not saying that I'm cool, but there's no future to that. There is no future to that. There's just an endless cycle, and it's losing energy as we speak at this stage. It's losing energy again because online culture is now in a mode of free fall at this stage. There's nowhere really for it to go, and so it has to kind of go down. And the heat's really getting to me. In August and September, I was really used to doing these things in saunas, and I'm not used to doing this anymore. It's getting to the 2:00 mark. For a while, I think this is the question everyone's trying to come to. I have kind of looked around and looked at various left-wing content creators because I keep on expecting them. I keep on expecting left-wingers to do what right-wingers do. So when right-wingers do something cringe, immediately 5 other right-wingers come out and dogpile them for being cringe or for being bad. And there's a constant fight. So when right-wingers do something wrong, there's an immediate correction. With left-wingers, the same thing does not happen. The left-wingers do cancel each other. Don't get me wrong. They always cancel each other. The revolution always eats its children. But left-wingers only cancel each other for one reason, and that's not being left-wing enough. Right-wingers will cancel each other for gaining weight, for making a fool out of yourself in a debate, for being partially Jewish. All of these things have been modes where people have tried to cancel me before. Even though some are more or less true than others. I'm not, in fact, Jewish unless you're measuring Semitic heritage through homeopathy methods, like very, very small fractions. But right-wingers will cancel each other for anything: for a bad hair day, for gaining weight, for doing bad in a debate, for having a bad take, for being too left, for being too right, for being too whatever. The left-wingers will only ever cancel each other for being not sufficiently leftist. That is the only valid reason to cancel someone from the left. So ContraPoints did get canceled, but they got canceled in the same way that all leftists got canceled, for not being sufficiently left-wing on the Palestinian issue. That's the only way you can cancel people on the left. But these people are all, the left is comprised of people who can see reality. At some point, they have to look at people like Seth Rogen, like the current crop of politicians in California, like just the absolute clusterfuck that is New York under Zoran Mamdani. They have to look at this stuff at some point and go, gee, guys, what's going on? Shouldn't we do something differently? And that will be the beginning of the end. That will be the beginning of the leftist fracture. When leftists start canceling each other for reasons that is not just being insufficiently left wing, then the dissolution of the left wing coalition that is the default religion of the American empire will start in earnest. We are not quite there yet. But one of the facilitators of this question is that even on the left, they realize that the online world is dying, and they're beginning to entertain the possibility of trying to build discourse and prestige in non-online spaces. And this is what's so interesting, because in this online, the left is in some sense much more powerful than we could ever be. They are friendly with the algorithms. They cross promote each other. They don't fracture as much. Again, the only reason why they cancel each other is for being insufficiently devoted to the cause. Despite what they say about being different parties, they are all essentially part of the same party. Katie Porty and Zohran Mamdani are on paper very different, but they all pull in the same direction, and they do not attack each other like they do the right. They do not have the same issue with infighting, at least ideologically speaking. And most importantly, there's an enormous amount of money that taken right out of the federal budget that just goes to pay people to be professional leftists. Just sit around and make leftist content, wherever, be a professional leftist. A huge percentage of our economy is just that. The right wing has no equivalent. They have no equivalent to that. They have no equivalent propaganda apparatus. When it comes to building things online, offline, post-online culture, immediately you see the left struggling with all of these questions about rules, about propriety, about living a good life or living a healthy life, things that in many ways the right wing has already discussed and already has an answer to. And this is something that I find kind of interesting, that in some sense, post-online culture is naturally right-wing. Where am I going to go from here? I guess this kind of gets us back to the whole, the woman question here. Right now, I think that there's been great strides in terms of organizing on the right, in terms of getting people to consider their online usage differently. I know that in a month I'm going to the national conference for the OGC, and I intend to write a treatise on that, and hopefully it'll be somewhat enlightening. No one's a master at this yet, but one thing that is initially a huge problem here is the woman question. I think this is going to be a stumbling block for the right wing generally. How do you incorporate women into a community building movement, which they need to be a part of at some stage, without having their group chat destroy the political avenues of that? That is the question, right? It is nothing is more clear in my mind now than the fact that women have to be socially a part of the right-wing project, but the right-wing political project has to be kept separate from the inclinations of female-dominated group chats or female-dominated social media writ large. If you want your movement to suffer the fate of Alex Kashuda's podcast, with all that implies for your family and for your country and for the future of your children, then by all means, get the women in your movement by putting your movement under the thumb of their group chat. That cannot be the case. I don't think anyone's really figured out, though, how to orchestrate the separation. I think the real lesson is that women cannot exist in a space where war and culture are conflated. Women just cannot participate in a culture war. It is that simple. They're not designed to perceive culture that way. They're designed to manage culture in a state of peace. They're designed to come into a space that already has a predefined set of rules and enforce those rules. They're not here to get into an argument about how to enforce certain rules or about what ultimately is good or who has to pay what. Otherwise, you get into these endless circular conversations like you do with the gender wars on Substack, where women can say that there are problems and that the future is doubtful and that the present rules are unsustainable, yet they can never commit to any course of action that would ever involve a sacrifice on any woman's part. They have to kind of skirt around that every time it actually comes to the fore and speculate that someone will do something in the future at some point. Women have to have war and culture separated. And this is a utility that future spaces, future organization apparatuses in the right wing, if you want to call it that, they'll have to respect this. They'll have to work to create this. There are political spaces and there are cultural spaces. And the cultural spaces have rules that are imposed by the political spaces. The cultural spaces will feed in from less organized artistic spaces where there are less defined rules. But in no case can female politics dominate the artistic space or the real political space where ideas are discussed and advanced. Now, the question I always have, the right wing is sort of hobbled by the fact that it is currently fragmented. I guess I could go through the camps here. I don't have much to say about these things, but I will try to give this here. You've got the Gran Torino boomers. Look, if you listen to Vivek Ramaswamy and everything he said about your religion and with all that he implies for the future of your country, and you still gave him your vote, then you are a Gran Torino boomer. Gran Torino is that famous Clint Eastwood movie where, it's kind of like on the surface, it's about like this old Detroit, not a redneck, but like, old factory worker, lives in Detroit, owns a gun, fought in Korea. And then a bunch of Hmong gangs come into his neighborhood and he just shows them who's boss. He goes down fighting, but he eventually comes out on top, even though he dies. He won out over them. And he defended the good Hmong from the bad guys that were the gangsters. And in exchange, he gives his children's inheritance, who are, all of his children are these ungrateful millennial upstarts. He gives their inheritance, which is the Gran Torino of the title, to the immigrants. Because those are the people who truly value it. I don't know. This is something that this is just something we're going to have to deal with. I keep on waiting for these people to wake up, and some of them are. It's happening very slowly, but most of them are just getting sucked into things like James Lindsayism. They're getting sucked into things like James Lindsayism. These are the guys that go around. They go around with Israel flags in their bios, and then try to get me to denounce Aaron McIntyre for the crime of having Alexander Dugin on the podcast in the name of defending the white race, which they never cared about before this very moment. These people are totally psyoped by television. In some sense, it's kind of weird that the progressive millennials, right, are more television people than right-wing millennials. When you look at people like Ryan Holiday and Seth Rogen, these are TV people. But when you look at any right-winger of my age, we are very, very much online people. We are very much blog people. Even though, we're not as into the social media as people even slightly younger than us. And it is kind of interesting that transition happened. But for conservative boomers, they are the most TV people of all time. And I don't know if there's anything that's going to change that. but there has to be a place to put them in the coalition. You've got another really irritating group of people that I encountered, the tough guy Zillennials. Again, my generation, these are the Zillennials that want to show that they're just better than Zoomers. Like, the fact that they're no longer young somehow one-shot them. And now they're going around lecturing Zoomers about how easy it is to get pussy, even if they're married. Look, if you're married and you're talking to young guy about getting pussy, like, you're already doing something that's really cringe. Flexing on the fact that you were able to get like a girl to sleep with you in the early 2000s, knowing how much the dating dynamics have changed. Not that I approve of premarital sex, but bragging about that is just the height of cringe. Yeah, I see these guys all the time, continuously arguing with boomers, trying to make a point about how Zoomers are lazy and useless and dooming for no reason. If you're talking online about this stuff and your reference frame is 10 years out of date, you're already losing. And I guess sort of like the correspondent pathology is on the Zoomer side, or really the Zillennial side, the people who were post-social media kids. They're just despondent at the stage. And not only that, they have this weird thing that everyone in the younger half of the millennial generation did. But whereas men of that sort of came of age in the 80s and early 90s, they always feign strength when they're in a confrontation over politics. Zillennials feign weakness. I consider this to be bizarre. I consider this to be absolutely bizarre. You're feigning weakness. And I'll never get over this. That this would be totally off. I mean, it's not even like a joke. It's not like the punchline isn't obvious. It's not like the millennial self-deprecating humor. It just, look how horrible my life is. Look how horrible my life is. How can that not totally crush your soul after doing that? I don't know. I mean, it's certainly not going to help you obtain power, because self-deprecation might be good if you're a comedian, or if you're in a grunge music band or something like that, like if you're Beck. But it's not gonna do anything for you if you're asking people to hand you the reins of power. It's actively hurting you. I don't know if I can really get that through to this generation, but somehow in this misfit army of toys, something has got to emerge from the woodwork that is actually going to translate into a real political movement, something that can actually meet on the ground. I bet you could tell how hot it is in this room based on how fast I am speaking, because I'm definitely slowing down. I'm definitely slurring my speech at this stage. So it reminds me of that famous scene in Apollo 13, the Ed Harris character. Apollo 13 explodes in space. There's debris flying everywhere. Alarms are going off. Everyone's reporting to the head of mission control about all the things that are going wrong. Right? And after hearing about all of these things that are going wrong, he silences the room. He lights up a cigarette, which is how you know this is the 70s. They allow cigarettes at NASA. And he just asks plainly, what do we've got in the ship that's good? You know? Which is the question that everyone should be asking themselves right now. What do we have on the right wing, on the non-progressive side, that is good? There's sort of an answer to that. The dad right. So there's two things that we have that our opponents do not. First of all, there's the well-known phenomenon that conservatives have more children. Now, this is misunderstood sometimes by conservatives, especially the tough guy millennial conservatives. I'm going to punch them every time they do this. They do things like, well, progressives aren't having any children, so we're going to breed them out of existence. What's your game plan when you don't have any children to teach your values to? I've got 4 children. I'm going to win this culture war. And to which the response is obviously, progressives don't need children. They've got yours. They run the colleges that you pay to send your kids to. They don't need children. They're importing a totally new demographic of strivers. They don't need children. They do not need biomass. That is not a utility for them. But if having children isn't the real utility, politically speaking, of having children, I mean, ultimately, like on a century-wide scale, that absolutely will be a political utility for the right. That will have an impact, like in 100 years. In our lifetime, in the scale that we care about as political actors, though, no. But what other utility is there for being the only side that really has a family culture to speak of? And this is what, me and another blogger called Black Horse used to call the dad right. And people misinterpret this. I think this really pissed off one pair of people, Evelyn and Scrump Monkey. They got furious at this idea. They went like on a year-long tirade about how pro-natalism isn't good politics. Pro-natalism isn't good politics. Pro-natalist policies will do nothing to actually get political power. It will just create more boomers. And what they're arguing is essentially the same things that I pointed out. That like in terms of timeframes that we would care about, the next 40 years, children aren't going to play a role in that. Having children are not going to play a role in that, even though on a civilizational time frame, it's the only thing that matters. But and so they've done all of these horrible, Evelyn and Scrump Monkey have done all these horrible videos like condemning natalism or pronatalism. Totally missing the point. The point is not we're going to have children and that like the demographic force is going to give us victory. Nobody who understands elite theory could possibly believe that's going to happen. The point of children is that it is an alignment criteria. I have explained this to Evelyn and Scrump Monkey multiple times. Pronatalism is not a policy proposal for taking power. It is a moral alignment litmus test. It is proof of concept. If someone says they're pro-natalist, that is not like their strategy for taking power. That is, can I trust you at a basic level? Can I trust you at a basic level? If you are not a pro-natalist, I cannot trust you at a basic level. I'm sorry. If you are not loyal to the human race and to God in some sense, if you're a nihilist or a misanthrope, if you are a part of the voluntary human extinction project or the implicit voluntary human extinction project, you are not a trustworthy political actor that I can trust with future actions. Evelyn and Scrap Monkey seem to completely miss this point. Moral litmus tests for reliable actors, while not a strategy in themselves, are premium. Because the real quest of our age, of this particular moment, when we talk about doing things in the real world, when we talk about building coalitions, it's not about having the right ideology or the right set of policy positions. Last week, I gave the example of Carl Benjamin versus Lauren Southern. Lauren Southern had all the right ideas. She was saying all the base things. She was doing all of the right-wing virtue signals. Completely unreliable person. Carl Benjamin was trying to rehabilitate Sam Harrisism. This is back in the day, not currently. But he was a very reliable individual. He was fighting for his children's future. In this era of generative AI and of the slopification of the internet, knowing who you can trust is the premium. I don't think the leftists have that. I don't think leftist actors genuinely know who their friends and enemies are in a way that's reliable. All they know is the people that spout off the right talking points. The left has more power, but their entire political apparatus is created out of the left-wing equivalent of what Lauren Southern was for the right. People who are there for the ride, for clout, people who ape the ideology because they're autists and they think that somehow political theory and political strategy manifest it the moment you talk about it in a live stream. That's not the operative question of our era. The operative question of our era is, who can you trust? Who can you trust? And the thing is, having a group of people, a group of men in particular, but women in a pinch, politics is what you cannot walk away from. Politics is what you cannot walk away from. Politics is what you cannot walk away from. That's one of the reasons why I don't take the right-wing women who left seriously. They walked away from their politics and they did not try to immediately find a new one. They said they cared about demographic replacement and family collapse and economic collapse and the rising crime rates and the growing social disillusionment and men hating women. But then when their social media properties fell apart, they didn't go to the left and try to solve those issues from a left-wing point of view. They just abandoned the issues altogether. Poof, who cares? I guess no one needs to talk about demographic replacement anymore. I guess no one needs to talk about crime rates anymore. I guess no one needs to talk about the crisis of family formation anymore. Who cares? Because it doesn't fit my brand, because I don't want to be a pick-me. The fact that they can walk away from it means that they were never doing this in a serious political way. Politics is what you cannot walk away from. When a person is a family man, in some ways they are a less effective political actor because an enormous amount of their time goes into their family. God knows I know that myself very, very distinctly. Most of my time goes into my family, not into this blog, not into organizing, and also my job, my day job. You know, that is never a truer word has been spoken than that. But you know where I stand. You know that I'm invested in the future. You know that my politics has to be organized around having a future for my son. And that's critical. And moreover, say, for instance, the left-right distinction did collapse. Say, for instance, that the often prophesized but never quite materializing great schism happens on the left, and suddenly the Son Pikers and the Katie Porters and the Matt Iglesiases and the Chuck Schumers, they start fighting in earnest, way more even than they did after October 7th. They just go at it. They treat each other like they treat right-wingers and not just like iterations slightly ahead or behind them on a progression. And even the meaning at that point, everything collapses, and even the meaning of left versus right has less and less meaning because everyone's getting called a right winger all the time. And now you have to walk into a room of people who are concerned about the future, and you have to make an appeal to them about why we need to sacrifice for the future. And what are you going to say as a leftist? Well, fellow citizens, if you look at Karl Marx's theory of class structure, no one agrees with that. Well, fellow leftists, if you look at intersectionality, nobody believes that. Well, if you remember World War II, a war that was fought 90 years ago, nobody cares about that either. No one cares about Hollywood movies or World War II's narrative of anti-Nazism or of intersectionality or of class struggle, which has not been relevant in the way that Marx has talked about it since basically the 70s and probably even way before that. It's an irrelevant understanding of how economics works at this stage in human development. None of those things are going to matter if you walk into a room. I walk into a room and I say this: I believe in God and goodness and the future. I want all of you to think about the future that your children are going to be inheriting in that light, because I want to fight for our children's future. And I know because I care about my child's future. Instant alignment. Instant alignment. No leftist will be able to survive that alignment struggle after the collapse of ideology. There was a great, I'm stealing this from Artie and Fist, the comedy show. They did this. Someone was it egregore commander or something. I had never heard of this person, but he did a takedown to James Lindsayism, the propositional nation. And it's very clear that all of these propositions are second order effects of ethnicity and religion and economics. And once any of those three things changes, they all go out the window. They all mean radically different things, which is why when political orders like the Soviet Union collapse, nobody goes back to communism. They go back to religion. They go back to ethnicity, just like Lee Kuan Yew said. The same thing is true for leftism. Once the apparatus of the American empire starts to falter, and once the schism begins in earnest, and leftists are no longer a unified party, but multiple parties, none of their ideology about intersectionality is going to matter at all. But walking into a room and talking about the future of our children will. Walking into the room and talking coherently about a common religion will. Coherently, I mean not in the way that Vivek Ramaswamy does. Like you actually believe it and you're not trying to con people or insult them. Having a family culture in the right will allow us to do that. While the children themselves are not an immediate political formula, the motivation of posterity is. That's what Evelyn and Scrump Monkey refuse to understand. It is not the children themselves, but the motivation of their existence as our posterity that acts as both a qualifying moral litmus test and an organizational priority that will bring serious people together to actually make sacrifices and solve problems rather than use them as a platform for gaining online clout in dying social media systems. That's the first advantage that the right wing has. That's the first thing that's good on our dying spaceship. The second thing that, the dad right is obviously the millennials. I guess to a lesser extent, the boomers, who might be the grandfather right of their time is the time for the Xers and the boomers is ticking down rapidly. So I'd urge you to get on the bandwagon soon and be the grandpa right. But that's one advantage on the millennial and older generations. On the Zoomers and younger, a great advantage is we have a monopoly on men who actually will fight for things. The entire left is comprised of scammers and cowards and men who have castrated themselves physically or spiritually. Once the uniparty narrative falls, none of them will stand up, none of them will make sacrifices, and they will all scatter and turn on themselves. We have a monopoly on Zoomers that can fight and that believe in things. All fighting is a war of belief. And we have the only real believers, I'm convinced. And look, we're in a non-believing age, so that's not saying much. But that's the utility. And that's the reason why the Zoomer doomerism always just kills me. It always just kills me because you're taking your greatest asset as a right-wing Zoomer, which is belief, which is hope, which is self-sacrifice, and you're presenting yourself like leftists do. It's like taking your pearls and casting them before swine. Why not walk into some of the energy? I mean, sure, make it fatalistic. Make it gallows humor. And maybe I'm taking this the wrong way. Maybe that's inappropriate for an online environment. Maybe what the Zoomers are trying to tell me is that they do have fight and energy and belief. But to speak like that online is to desecrate it. And the best they can do is to hide the pearl of great value away from the profane streets that are the social media platforms. And so what they give up is just the fakeness. They feed fakeness into fakeness, truth into truth, loyalty into loyalty. But I just want to urge them, don't be a person you don't want to be online because you'll turn into that person eventually. You will. The biggest problem is a sense of urgency paralyzes people. There are a lot of projects that need to get done, but they're all long-term. They all involve doing things today where the realization of their benefits won't procure for another 5 years. The Old Glory Club is a seed that we planted 3 years ago, and it's just now starting to bear a little bit of fruit, just the beginning. The green shoot of that couldn't happen unless the seed was planted 3 years ago. Not by me. I was very tangential. I was at the conference where those guys put it together. All the other things we have to build are going to take much longer time frames to build. But the problem is that no one wants to invest in that because the world seems like it's changing so fast that the second you commit to something, you're going to get destroyed in the short term. You're going to miss out on an immediate opportunity. You're going to get mogged in the comments. You're going to get completely destroyed one way or the other. And so everyone's just paralyzed. We know what we need to do, but all we're doing is watching our feed, watching the world change in front of our eyes, and we can't actually pull the trigger. There's one meme that I want to relay to you: the red button versus blue button. This is internet clickbait. I'm not gonna lie, it's internet clickbait, but we're gonna review it here, right? I got lectured about how I was stupid for not pressing the red button or stupid for not pressing the blue button. So here's the scenario, right? It's stupid. It's a game theory problem. Like I said, it's a game theory problem dressed up to look like a trolley problem. So everybody has to press the button. It doesn't really specify who everyone is. I guess it's the world. It's the world. Maybe it's a room full of people. Who knows, right? That's part of the problem. Everyone has a choice of a button to press, the red button or the blue button. If you press the blue button, if you press the blue button and a majority of people, above 50%, press the blue button, if the blue wins the vote, everybody lives. If you press the red button, then nothing happens to you. You live. But if the blue buttons lose the vote, if red wins the tie, then all of the people who press the blue button die. Now, initially, this is like a classic prisoner's dilemma. Here's how both people think about it. And it's a framing issue. So the red button people say this. They say, red button guarantees survival. You have no idea who's going to win the vote. You might as well save yourself. If you press the blue button, you're basically committing suicide. Everyone presses the red button. Nobody needs to die. The blue button people say, well, certainly someone's going to press the blue button, and it would be immoral to not make blue win, knowing that somebody is going to press the blue button who doesn't deserve to die. And that is the moral choice. Ultimately, the game is stupid. It is, look, I can paint pictures for you that will make it insane to press either red or blue. First situation, the world is comprised of sociopaths. The world is comprised of total sociopaths who will press the red button. No matter who presses the blue button, you know in advance that the blue will never win. In that situation, you obviously press the red button. Second scenario, you are on a deserted planet and all you have is you and your children. And several of your children are toddlers. They don't even understand the problem. And with those toddlers is their mothers. Do you press the red button and blue button if it's just you and your extended family? You know that your son, your daughter, your niece, your nephew, one of them is going to press the blue button by accident. And furthermore, you know that your wife knows that your grandparents know that your parents know that those children's parents know that. They're all going to press the blue button. Do you still enter a coalition to press the blue button and kill all of them in their attempt to save the one or two toddlers that press the blue button just because they don't understand the question? Of course you don't. And in any high trust society where you know some people are going to push the blue button is the ethical choice. It is the only choice. Some toddler has walked into the killing machine, and now the question is how many people are going to go in and try to rescue them by jamming the machine with a majority? Do you risk your life to save that toddler or do you not? Now, the trick is that this question isn't straightforward in the sense that you can modulate the state of the universe. Notice that I said in a high trust society, everyone would press the blue button. But if you live among a world of sociopaths, all it is suicide, and you know it's suicide. So by modulating the probabilities, you can construct scenarios where it would be unethical to press the red button because it would just, or the blue button because it would just be suicide. And you can create situations based on trust of the population that you can press the you can't ethically press the red button because you would essentially be contributing to a force that is killing a bunch of children or otherwise innocent people that are either, too naive or not knowledgeable enough to be selfish. The question, what makes it so infuriating, is that it 100% relies on the moral nature of the population in question and how much you're willing to risk possibly modifying it. If you press the blue button and you die, will society learn the lesson from you and get more moral? Or will it get more immoral? That's an open question. Can people communicate in some way what the choice is to press the blue button or the red button? Do you know that a sizable near majority is reaching for the blue button already? Can there be organizations of people who agree in advance and combine to go all red or all blue? All of these things would matter in a strict game theory problem, and none of them are specified by the problem in its basic statement. So what you have is two people arguing over completely different scenarios. You've got the red button people thinking that they're in a room full of criminal sociopaths, and you've got the blue button people thinking they're in some iteration of the family who have 5 children that are going to press the blue button because they like the color blue. That's what's going on. And so people are totally arguing past each other. The interesting question, though, is one of collective action. And this gets to the thesis of the talk that I want to give here tonight, finally after 2 hours of doing this. What is the issue of collective action? How do we take it? When we talk about civilizational restoration, we are talking about orchestrating mass blue button pressing so that we can move into a room, a locality, a house, a state, a nation, and by force of our politics, all press the blue button and have the whole thing go blue. And if we win the blue button competition, that area is now our home. And if we lose it, we're all destroyed by the retaliation of the people who want us dead. This is the question that we actually have to answer for ourselves when we organize in real life. What can't you leave behind? What would you sacrifice for? If you knew your child had pressed the blue button, could you not press the blue button too? Politics is what you can't leave behind. Politics is what you can't leave behind. How do you get a collective action to occur? How do you make blue win? There's a critical essay. Oops. If I could pick the right slide, that would be good. A critical essay was published on the Old Glory blog by the editorial staff, a mission statement. Stop me if you think that this is not familiar. You forge a life for yourself. Things are harder than you ever thought they would be when you were growing up as a teenager. You were promised wealth if you followed the rules, an easy life, a middle class existence, maybe even more than that. But you enter into your youth, maybe your early middle age, like myself, and you realize that nothing works. None of the promises are going to come through for you at all. You are now stuck in a world and everything seems broken. And that's fine, I guess. You adjust your expectations. It's not like you thought it would be. Maybe you're like me and you live in a geriatric neighborhood where everyone around you is just elderly. That seems altogether possible. But what you notice here is that there are too many things going wrong. You want to fix your church, but the problem is there are too many people who are taking and not enough people who are giving. You can't take that weight all on your shoulders. If you focus on the church, then maybe your enemies are going to take city council, and then all of that work will be done away with because they changed the code or because they stopped cooperating with your parish. And then all the work you did with your church is going to be blown away. The same thing with your local Republican Party. You can't create a chapter of that because it's already dominated by neocons. And putting your nose to the grindstone and working on that means that your flank is exposed. Block parties are going to go offline because the people who organize them are too old. Managerial positions are all going to go to either our enemies or remain unfilled, or will be automated by valueless machines that are probably not going to have our interests at heart. All of the institutions that used to be guarded, that used to be under human control, that used to be under allied control, are going to disintegrate, lapse into automation, or are going to be taken by our enemies potentially. As the Old Glory Club article puts it, we imagine power as being a crown that has fallen into the gutter. There is one scepter of state. The revolutionary power destroys that state, and the power falls into disrepair, and then someone picks up the crown with a sword and becomes the new king, like Napoleon. Classic model, but an entropic collapse at the level that we're talking about. The state is not toppled, it's shattered into a million shards. And there's shards everywhere, and there's not enough to pick up. And if any one person did pick up the thousands of crowns that have been scattered around, that are unoccupied, they'd be crushed under the weight of those crowns. They'd be crushed under the weight of the crowns that are there. And so your options are hope that someone will take power or try to take power yourself, and very few people are in that position. Or alternatively, try to pick up the crowns and not get crushed. But you can't do that alone. You can't pick up one tiny crown and turn your back to put yourself at the mercy of your enemies. You have to know that there are other people working in alignment with you, working in proximity to you, that have a similar vision for a future, that have a similar spiritual orientation towards God and towards order and away from chaos, that care about that future because their children will live in it. You won't pick up any of those tiny crowns that litter the literal street that you live on unless you know that other people who are your friends are also picking up crowns. And at the end of the day, you will have some microcosm of order and power and rulership that actually works and responds to things like it should. That you can create some kind of micro world where people pick blue for the greater good, blue for the children that don't know better, for the future that we cannot see, and to risk the retaliatory strikes in the other direction. It's a fraternity of doing things. It's a fraternity of people who can't walk away from their problems, who are bound together by proximity, who are brought together by the imperative to act and to employ ideas for the ultimate cause of political aims that are essential to our future. That's the organizing principle of OGC. That is the organizing principle of Beowulf. That is the organizing principle of Exit Group. I don't know, Return to the Land, but I'm sure that's the organizing principle of those people there too. This is the thing that actually binds people together, that makes political organization possible. I think that's where we end for tonight. I think the internet's a clarifying contradiction. It's kind of funny to see how it plays out. Everyone's kind of walking off the ride at the stage. It's like, one of those rides at the amusement park that spins around a lot. And some people, the ride stops and they walk on, and they walk off the same way that they walked on, just like in a straight line, didn't affect them at all. And other people will just fall down vomiting and then pass out. They're just destroyed by it. And some people were just destroyed by the internet. I think the only way you can really figure out whether you were destroyed by the internet is to join with your people who are of like mind with you in the local community and see exactly where your thoughts about the future come together and push in a common direction. Our politics are about those things that we can't leave behind. And that, I think, is going to be the politics of the future. Well, guys, thank you very much. I would ordinarily do entropy chats right now, but I am going to be doing super chats. I don't even have it set up. I just have to read them. I'm sorry I can't display it on the screen, guys. I see people have been very generous. But yeah, we're giving money to Google. I will read even the ones written by my wife. We will do that. Oh, wow. So I have to actually go to super chats on, well, okay. I guess I have to go to studio and read them there. The glare. What is it, Google? Okay. That looks like it's a little bit better. Community. I think the super chats are there. They're not? Okay. It's been so long since I've used super chats that I am almost kind of blanking on where this is. It is. I'm pretty sure it'll see it in dashboard, right? They gotta have it there. I don't think I can scroll all the way up is the problem. Maybe I can go here. Someone link me. Is there like a link for the super chats? Oh. I apologize, guys. I can't possibly ignore them. So I have to look for this, unfortunately. But give me a second and I will find them. Under community, I'm going to assume it's there. I'll just keep on talking. Apologies for the people who are maybe earn. Here we go. Okay, perfect. That's all of them. Okay, excellent. Wow. Okay, that is all. That's from years ago. Okay, I just want the ones from tonight, please. Thank you very much. Okay, this is okay. Perfect. Let's zoom in a little bit, and I will read them to the best of my ability. Let's turn this down here so I don't look like I'm being backlit. Okay, so the first super chat of the evening is it says May 3rd. So they don't even have the date right. This is perfect. Okay, the first one's from Megamax for $10. Thank you very much. Somehow Lauren Southern returned, and now, like Gypsy's curse or the game, by mentioning her to you, you are afflicted to talk about it here again. What a horrid night to be cursed and lose the Lauren Southern game. Okay. Yes, the only winning move with Lauren Southern is not to play. What a horrible, horrible grifter Lauren Southern is. She absolutely lived up to all of the worst things everyone said about her from the beginning. It's hard to admit. I just look, women like that need to be forcibly removed from politics. And so I think that it's just, it's something that you got me on going on Lauren Southern right now. And there's probably 100 degrees in this room. I've got to find some way to cool this room down without interfering with a microphone. A fan will not work, and I can't open the windows because we do not have good acoustics, and I'm afraid that the neighbors are going to hear my ranting. They're going to hear me screaming into the microphone about various things, about Vivek Ramaswamy and Vishnu. Yeah, that'll be I'll go over great in California. Me cursing Vishnu will echo throughout the neighborhood. There you go. Well, thank you very much. I don't know if I can really say much about that. We have three wonderful contributions from my wife directly into the coffers of Google, since that money goes straight from my account into my account, with Google taking a 33% cut of that. So thank you, Tilting Turtle, for your generous contribution to Google. Anyway, Austrian Stories for $2 said, thoughts on Jason Reza Giorgiani. What is that? Jason Reza Giorgiani. I don't know. Boa. This just hit nothing. Jason Giorgiani. Okay, this looks interesting. Okay. Jason Reza Giorgiani is an American philosopher and writer. He was a lecturer at the New Jersey Institute of Technology. Blah, 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 blah. He was associated with Richard Spencer, I guess. But I don't know. What did he do recently? You say I'm aware of him. I had to look him up. So obviously I can't really speak on him. Oh, he's Arctos. Arctos. That's his thing. I mean, I liked Arctos. Arctos does tons of good stuff. It's a little bit too like transhumanist for my taste. I think that they're a little into this like esoteric transhumanism. I really like to stay away from occult stuff like that. And I think there's a lot of good reasons to stay away from occult stuff. But I have seen Arctos, on the other hand, produce a lot of good things. So I don't want to damn people for their worst associations. That's not very fair, right? That's not very fair. I've had people who I've worked with in the past that I wouldn't want to be associated with. So I think I owe Jason charity for that. Chan the Man says, do you recommend your programming career? At this stage, absolutely not. I mean, look. If you want to develop, like, you go into programming if you want to. Absolutely. Like go into software design. Like being a software designer is something that you should probably look into. Being somebody who designs things for humans and designs software for usability, and who can do, I mean, modeling, I think, is something that will still be a thing. I think modeling has certain dimensions that are more art than science and is not going to be automated away. But insofar as like the code monkey, GitLab managing, code slinging, stuff like that, that is absolutely not a good career path at this stage. That is going away as we speak. And look, there are still going to be cases where you're going to need to hard code stuff. So you're going to have to learn this to a certain extent. So I would absolutely recommend learning one or two programming languages, but don't break your brain over learning programming at this stage. Uh, just focus on what software you want to build and then bring that into existence by whatever means is possible available to you, whether it's vibe coding or hard coding, or most likely a combination of vibe coding and hard coding. So that's my recommendation. Remember, there is always an art to engineering that is a human and based on experience and cannot just be algorithmized even by perfectly trained LLMs. So there always is a question of design that I think it is irresponsible, at least, to exclude humans from, if not impossible. Impossible is like if you want to build a bad product, if you want to lead to decisions that will be detrimental to humanity down the future, you can technically do it. You could technically put a for loop in charge of the government as well if you wanted to. It just, it just will fail at a certain point and lots of people will have bad things happen to them. But focus on the end product of the software and what it does, of model construction, of architecture, of delivery, of reliability, of objectives and constraints. That is where the translation between code that to this point is developed largely by LLMs, although some hard coding, and the actual purpose of the software and our ability to control it and use it in a responsible way. That is where I put your emphasis if you're going into the software field right now. But man, is that field impacted, so I would proceed with caution. What's the Tobrias for $2 says, what's the reactionary view on grief? Stoic? Reactionary is a label. It's not a philosophy like Stoicism. Obviously, Stoicism believes that all emotion should be, in some sense, internalized. I guess they can be expressed. They can be expressed in certain contexts that would be appropriate and good to the common the common path of humanity, like a Stoic would say. But there's no reactionary view on grief. I think that if you look at the world right now and you aren't stricken with a certain sense of civilizational grief, then I think there's something kind of wrong with you. I think that not feeling grief is a totally inappropriate way to experience the world as we see it in this day and age. And so because of that, I think that grief is good. It sounds kind of emo. Grief is good, man. Grief is good. Meh. Toss my hair back. I don't have wavy, emo hair. Although I think I'm getting that move from the South Park goths. So proceed with caution. Ceridian for $10 said, hello, Mr. Green. I found only one website that actually has discourse. For the Mott, the Mott, it's literally called the Mott. Is there an alternative called Bailey? I have never found anything else like it. TheMott.com. That's such an inside joke. I'm sure it's run by Bay Area rationalists and Slate Star Codex fans if it has a title that is The Mott. I've never found anything else like it. Also, does one keep their chin up in these dark times? Look, focus on, if you have spirituality, lean on spirituality. Focus on your duties and focus on engage with the real world that you have before you. Think of that speech from Henry V. If we are doomed, then we are enough to give our country loss. And if to win the fewer men, the more there is to glory. Do not wish for one man more. I do wish for one man more. But the attitude that Hal expresses in that famous speech is critical. Like, if we're doomed, then let's make a good go at it. I don't want to be a doomer myself, but that's obviously what everyone should. And I don't think we are doomed. If you stack everything up. I think that there's just the stars have not aligned. Maybe civilization is going to go through something of a reset, but the idea that we're just totally checkmated seems ridiculous at this stage, even with all the darkness coming from things like technology and socio-political disintegration of core institutions, and the interminable crisis of the fact that the boomers cannot see the problems right in front of their noses. They cannot see the decision that is right in front of us right now. Anyway, I wish I could say I would check out the Mott, but if someone invites me to a conversation there, I certainly wouldn't say no. Mega Max for $20. Well, thank you. That's very generous. I am announcing my denouncing of the dissident right. I am aware that the announcement of imminent denouncing has been seriously recurring issue lately, and I'm here with my bottom level my political level skills to ensure that it will not only worsen another $20. I hope that this movement, full of mostly male members, will appreciate the fact that I will soon be denouncing and offer me that coveted high five that I so surely deserve, as the announcement of my imminent denouncement is not in the current political etiquette. I will continue to toe this line, and any and all action taken against me by the Green Team will be considered an extrajudicial, and I will retaliate by mobilizing my army of anger, bitter e-girls. If any bros want to provide me a high five or emotional satisfaction, please do so. If any e-girls wish to provide me with happy satisfaction, ew, thank you. Well, that was a very generous super chat when it's fully assembled. I appreciate that. Look, you can't denounce the dissident right. I already denounced the dissident right. And, I am the leader of the dissident right, and I denounce the dissident right. So we're all will denounce the dissident right together. Maybe it'll even be an organizing principle. Another one by Mega Max says, and please remember, I am now denouncing the dissident right. I dislike the YouTube super chat censor. Okay, well, there you go. Thank you very much. Chan the Man says, for $2, thoughts on Luke Smith, Linux and Orthotrad. I was a huge fan of Luke Smith. He kind of disappeared. Like I was, after my PhD, I was polishing off my development skills. I had minored in computer science in my undergraduate, in which I was trained on C++ and Java. Those are my languages. And so when I finished my career doing academic Python and MATLAB for my PhD program, I went back into the world of programming and learned development level Python. And in the process of that, I watched a lot of Luke Smith videos to kind of brush up on all of that stuff. In the era of LLMs, I haven't been super interested in the tech side of things. My attitude is that LLMs are kind of 99% scams. And so the appropriate way to participate in them is to always assume they're lying to you or just repeating what Google says. That being said, you can actually absolutely use Claude to vibe code up a damn good application if you need to. And that is a utility. And look, they may be demonic at a certain level. They certainly are causing people to go into AI psychosis. They may be a threat in the future, but you have to go with it with both eyes open. But the problem is that I don't really feel like kernel hacking in the era of vibe coding. It's not really worth my time at this stage. I really do. Luke Smith had created this amazing video about programming and the logos way back in 2021. I thought that was like a masterpiece. It was like Jordan Peterson taken to the next logical level. And I thought that was just an amazing essay, an amazing video. And I could not recommend that enough. I haven't watched it in ages, so I have no idea whether it holds up or whether we're all kind of spouting those ideas right now. But it's a good thing. I really, really like Luke Smith. I haven't watched his recent stuff. I would actually, I still like Unix. I still program in Unix. I still shell hack. I still hard code. It's part of the job. Hard coding is part of I think hard coding will always be part of the job. At some point, to fully do modeling, you have to get down and dirty. And if you're not tweaking the model, then you're essentially not in the loop. And that is an irresponsible way to produce code, in my opinion. Anyway, Darth Kilhoun says $2. Hey Dave, no question, just here as a tip. Thank you very much, Darth Kilhoun, a longtime entry bow. I am very sorry if that service is going away. I hope they are able to bring the website back up. I hope this is just a temporary outage, but we'll see. I based on my discussion with them, I mean, this has been a problem for a while, so I'm expecting at least a few months before Entropy comes back as a service. So this transition might be more permanent than we all might like. But Warpy Smith or Waspy Synth says $10 Australian. $10 Australian dollary dues. Missed the live stream again. It's Mark, by the way. Does that mean Newsfit? Well, okay. I don't want to speculate who that is or dox anybody. It's Mark, by the way. I'll catch up. I've started to write about Harry Potter, and my reactionary book club is going well. Glad to see the stream is going on. Praying for you and yours. It's always very hard for me to speculate on real people versus online screen names without doxing people, which is why if you have a handle that is the handle from Entropy or what you told me your name is if we've met in real life, I have to refer to you just by the name that appears here. Otherwise, I will potentially dox you, which would be very, very bad. Conact says for $100. Wow, thank you very much. He says, hi, Dave, a middle-aged medical professional father here. I work with sometimes neurotic, condescending younger female colleagues and subordinates, and a girl boss. I've tried to work hard, but still run afoul of their perfectionist standards. Is this situation salvageable? Yeah, I think that the only way you can do it is just not to care. I wish that for your very generous super chat, I could tell you something more. But the one thing you want to do is just, I mean, like with Walt Bismarck, I never know exactly how much of my conversations with Walt Bismarck are jokes and how much are serious. So I want to be humble about this, and I don't want to put words in his mouth. But he's always talking about like status and frame and diachronic control and all this. If you're a man or an older man who's established, the way you respond to female moral grandstanding is to express extreme apathy, extreme lack of caring, and to simply hold your space and to kind of establish your own rules and operate in your own way. Not caring about it and treating like what they're doing as if it's trivial is the way that you can kind of establish a healthy relationship with this, as far as I can tell. Look, back in 2018 to 2022, girls like this would be trying to cancel older guys all the time. They've really calmed down about that. That's less socially acceptable. And now is the time to kind of establish boundaries. And that is what I would say if you're a medical professional father. What you really want to do is you want to say, like, we're establishing this boundary. If they're coming after you with their moral system, say, like, I really respect your moral system. I really respect the fact that you're trying to keep everyone happy and courteous. But at the same time, you have to respect the fact that I have different moral aesthetic choices than you. And I do not want to participate in exactly what you're doing in the same way you do. And I think that it would be professional for both of us to pursue that boundary and respect the boundaries when we state them. And if you do that, then oftentimes they'll just shut up. So, there's that. Okay, here we are. We're back. I had to refresh this. On the Zoomer critique, you said that they're faking weakness, but I'd argue that they legitimately feel hopeless. They do not feel that they have a chance to form families and step into adulthood. They feel stuck, so they despair. Oh, I totally, 100% Caleb, they are feeling hopeless. And I agree that times are darker than they ever have been. But part of if you want to get devoured by hopelessness, I'm sorry, that's kind of very, we're not on the right wing to get devoured by hopelessness. We're on the right wing to fight. That's how I see it. And so, in my mind, if you're not kind of let's borrow Zoomer culture and say, in my mind, if you're a Zoomer and you're not kind of Battle of Agincourt 300, I know, cringe reference because that's a millennial movie from the early 2000s. If you're not like Spartans tonight we dine in hell, you're not thinking about the world in a way that is going to help you out. Nothing is easier right now than to give in to hopelessness, but I think we have to fight that. And look, I mean, I don't know what I can give young Zoomers so that they don't feel hopelessness. It's I can tell them what our plans are. I can tell them what our chances are, like what our hopes are. I can describe to them a path where we could get from here to building a more productive future. I could tell them all of those stories and I could lay out all those plans. I can't promise that they'll work. No one knows the future. I can almost promise, although not quite, that if these opportunities disappear and these futures close for us, new opportunities will open, like the cheesy evangelical line, when God closes a door, he opens a window, or something like that. But I do believe that there always is hope to be found. And I think that a lot of the Zoomer stuff, like I at one point want to sympathize with them, but I feel that if I sympathize with them too much, I'll encourage their doomerism, which is the exact opposite of what I want to encourage. And that is the dilemma that millennials or older millennials find themselves in. And, look, I mean, if you're a Zoomer, I sympathize, but I'm trying to give you a little bit of the tough love, like support and sympathy, but also kind of a kick in the pants sometimes, like when you look like you're bed rotting, as you guys say, All right, Douglas Calder for $5. Dad in postpartum room, rocking my first son and third kid born yesterday. Wow, congratulations. So it's 2 daughters and a son. Congratulations. I like the dad right, but my wife says the dad wrong. Oof, what a dad joke. The dad right or the dad wrong. Well, I mean, that is why women control table manners and they control household etiquette, but they're not involved in our war rooms. Thank you very much. The dad right needs to be a thing. The dad right will be a thing. It already is kind of becoming a thing. It already is becoming kind of an idea that whose time has come. And now with our very young friend Connor Tomlinson joining the dad right with his announcement today that he is going to be a father in November, I think that for a certain cohort of young men and older men and middle-aged men, we will start seeing the world in a very, very similar way. And there will be a lot of fruitful ideas that come from that. Hopefully I am still broadcasting. I think I am, right? Okay, I think. Okay, something happened. I got reset, but I think that you guys didn't see that. So I will proceed reading the super chats still. I am almost at the end, I think. Charlie Mackey for $25 says, good evening. I hope you and yours are well. Thank you very much, Charlie Mackey. Good to have a tip. Very much so. This is people are giving a lot more on Google than they ever did in Entropy. I don't want to give money to evil corporations, but this is certainly tempting me back. But thank you very much, Charlie Mackey. Isaac Young, our very good author. My wife is reading your book, Isaac Young, Domes of, I still can't pronounce it, Calrathia. Everyone buy Domes of Calrathia. It is definitely the one that appeals to me more than his other series because I'm a Gene Wolfe fan, and the other ones that are inspired by different types of fiction, I've never really been into that as much. Yeah, but definitely if you're into sci-fi, one of the best writers in our scene at this time, and he's a very young man, so I'm looking forward to what he'll produce in the future. Uh, the doomer zoomer is venting, and they don't restrain themselves strategically because social media does not have a strategic use for most people. It's a substitute for shattered in real life social circles. Yeah, I get venting, but venting works for women. Venting, if it's not done in a particularly comedic or performative way, tends to be used to destroy men. Venting is, I have vented and have had women in particular use that to destroy me in the past. I've vented about something that I was frustrated with publicly, and then I had my enemies use that against me. Venting is something that women can do and get social brownie points for. It's something that men can very rarely do. Now, look, I don't know what Zoomer social dynamics are, but it strikes me as male venting being a source of weakness is is um is something that's been a persistent feature of male social reality. Displays of emotion in anything other than a highly performative way by men has been considered a sign of weakness since the age of the Stoics, and obviously even far before that. Maybe that's changed in the Zoomer generation in the last 5 years. The probability that something has existed for 4,000 years and changed in 2021 is very low. So I would like the Zoomers to consider that they are not the first generation, and that this venting can and will be used against you by your enemies. And so I think that I don't know. Look, it's just like you can do this. I just think it's a risk. And you're young, it's probably not going to affect you that much. You'll bounce back from it if people do use it against you. People use my event against me. I'm still here. But I just be careful of that. Be careful of developing that habit. Chan the Man, part two, in a chemistry undergrad. I was thinking of a computer science major and self-learned programming in the summer to semiconductor job industry. Thoughts? Now that sounds like a plan. I have some relatives who work in the chemical industry, and nobody knows programming there. If you can learn one programming language over the summer, probably Python is the one you want to learn. Although in this day and age, does it really matter, right? And then you get a CS minor, and you pick up the the model protocol skills and agentic AI loops that are obviously the new stuff on the block. If you have that with your chemistry knowledge and you go into semiconductor manufacturing, that seems like a damn good. And I worked in semiconductor manufacturing for 3 years. Not my cup of tea. I'm not going to lie. I don't like working on an assembly line. But it's damn good money, and it is a growth industry, and it's something that people are going to want to onshore. So if you combine chemistry and model building and computer science and the new LLM stuff, that package seems like it could actually work. And that's what you really have to do. You don't want one skill. This is the age of being a generalist. This is the age of being a responsible generalist, which is kind of good for me because I'm a generalist if ever there was one. Isaac, again, $10. Again, I think continuing on the Zoomer question, it's also because every young man who's not a podcaster has been punished for strength, and feigning strength you don't have would be strategically wrong for many in real life context, as destructive as it is. Well, look, you don't want to flex. It's subtle, Isaac. You don't want to moan and you don't want to flex. You just want to come in neutral and then exert strength when you know you're going to win. That's how you play it. When you know you're going to win, exert strength. And if you are taking a chance and you fall on your ass, frame it like it's a big joke. And I know that's the part that millennials do that Zoomers don't. Because when Zoomers fall on their ass, there's always someone with an iPhone there ready to record it and hold it against them. So flexing is hard. Well, flexing is always bad, but strategically showing your strength can be very, very difficult as a Zoomer, because unless you're 100% going to pull it off, it could be used against you. I think that Zoomers have overweighted on that concern. When you look at somebody like Clavicular or Nick Fuentes, to pick a Zoomer example, I think those people are kind of immoral but they demonstrate how confident risk-taking still is something that men can do. They fall on their butts all the time, sometimes literally, and they never get hurt because they have this kind of roll with the punches attitude. And I think that I'm not saying you need to become clavicular or Nick, certainly don't become clavicular. And if you want to go the Nick Fuentes route, please don't be such a, I don't know, a Nick Fuentes type person. You know what I'm talking about. Don't be the kind of person who rises and leaves like a path of dead bodies behind him. Don't be the man who has no friends after he's found success. Uh, that's not good business. But if you can ape Nick Fuentes' ability to just not give a shit about what people say about you and to focus on your end goal, that's the only way out of the situation. Telling women no or ignoring it when they try to morally scold you for something that you know you didn't do wrong. That's what women will always do. They won't scold you for something that you did that was wrong. They'll try to scold you for doing something that looks like it was wrong, AKA you didn't do anything wrong. So they'll sit there and they'll scold you for being part of the dissident right because the dissident right has trolls. Yeah, but using the word dissident right and not trolling women does not make me morally culpable for anonymous people who do troll women. It doesn't work like that. And they'll try to, women will try to convince you that you need to like overreact to not even moral violations, but the appearance of moral violations. Hence, like, what do they always say? That's not a good look. That's not a good look. Well, did I do anything wrong? No, but it's not a good look. Well, if it's not a good look, then why am I winning right now? Why are people actually paying attention to me and not paying attention to you? No reason. They're just trying to scold you. And if you can copy that aspect of Nick Fuentes' personality while not kind of being like, a little sociopath like he is, that is a dynamite combination for the Zoomer. Don't be like Clavicular. Clavicular is a neurotic mess. Beyond the fact that he looks kind of good, which I don't even think he looks that great, he's like a trans person. He's going to fall apart the second his jaw does. And then he's going to go into a tailspin and no one will ever hear about him again. He's going to have like a plastic surgery mishap. This is how Clavicular is going to end. He's going to do a lot of plastic surgery to get a new look every day that people talk about. And then somebody is going to say, damn, Clavicular, you just look plain ugly. And then like clockwork, everybody is going to say the emperor has no clothes. They're all going to admit that he's ugly. And that's going to be the last time you hear about Clavicular. Like, he'll try to get into the news cycle somehow. But just being a plain old creep or a plain old sociopath is not interesting. Sam153 for $20. Wisdom distilled as usual. Dave, King Jeet Vivek midterm might just be the most intolerable thing with the GOP going down in flames. Sickeningly hilarious. I mean, it's just, we need to destroy the GOP, guys. This is, I don't think, like, don't do what Nick does. Don't be like, oh, we're going to join the Democratic Party. It's not your job to be part of the force that destroys our civilization. But you don't want to be part of whatever is going on in the Republican Party right now. You want to create your own separate, and look, that doesn't mean you can't participate in young Republican Party events or that you can't take over your local GOP. But whatever Vivek Ramaswamy is doing, you want to be as far away from that as humanly possible. That is an absolute clusterfuck. The only person that will benefit from that is Vivek, his family, and maybe his race, although probably not. Everyone else is going to get BTFO'd and is going to be totally destroyed by their investment. Just like that scam medical treatment that he tried to sell to people, even though he knew it didn't work. Thank you very much, Sam153. And I think this is the last one of the night. Maybe this is not. Okay, you are smart. So Swamp Stain for $10 says, you are smart and must surely understand that politics is downstream from religion. Yeah, that's kind of my thing to say that, Swamp Stain. I say politics is downstream from religion all the time. That's like my tagline. I have the picture with Lorgar from Warhammer 40K with the sign that says this is a war of belief, but without the sweaty shirt. Yeah, definitely. Politics is downstream from religion. As a Catholic, why have you not spoken more about the catastrophe that is Vatican II and the post-conciliar church? Oh, that's obvious. It is. I am not qualified or competent to speak as a theologian, nor is it my job to counter-signal the Holy See. Now, I absolutely will voice in private my dissatisfaction with the church leadership and how they have handled post-Vatican II. I will absolutely express that privately. If you talk to me in public, I will express my disapprobation about it. I'm not a Latin Mass person. I'm a Novus Ordo person, but I would like the Latin Mass to be held as a parallel extraordinary form, the way that I think Benedict and John Paul II were moving towards. That is obviously the path forward for the church, in my honest opinion. But it's not I do not have the competence to speak on theology. I do not have the competence to challenge the Holy See, even though I have misgivings about its political leadership. And it's not although it is my job, politically speaking, as an actor, to point out where the Vatican is wrong, politically speaking, in areas where the Vatican is not vested with supreme authority to make decisions. I can say Pope Francis or Pope Leo is doing something stupid politically, is doing something that is unwise. I can say that, and I have said that in the past. I don't think it's a large part of my job to stand up here as a non-Catholic public figure and signal my opposition to a political leader that is above me as a functional monarch. That these are not the proper channels to voice these concerns. Nothing good could come of me publicly denouncing Vatican II or publicly expressing personal distaste for Leo, other than our enemies benefiting and no change being affected in the church. I want to affect positive change in the church for the good of the eternal church. And as I see it, there's no opportunity to do that in the public forum that is the open internet. That is a private conversation for Catholics only. There is a discussion to be had about Vatican II. That discussion has to happen among only people who are actually invested in the continuation of the Church of Rome. Anything else, and we'll get concerned trolls coming in, stirring up trouble just so they can watch the Catholics tear each other apart. And they will do so, and the only person that will benefit will be Satan. Wazi Quaza for $2. I publish under my real name anyway. Well, thank you, Waz P. Quaza. Sounds good. I'll look for your work at a very unorthodox area of the Dewey Decimal System. Isaac Young for $20. I've been thinking about embodying strength and identity in social media without being fake manosphere podcaster. The family patriarch is one way, but not useful to bachelors. Zoomers at this stage. Advice for grounding identity? Well, look, Isaac Young, you're a young artist. I mean, I don't want to dox you, but I know you're I wasn't married at 24. I didn't get married until I didn't meet my wife until I was 10 years older than you are right now. 10 years I was single. And, for the first part of that period, I was not very successful with women at all. I had to find myself. You are at this stage of your life, the young adventurer, the young artist. Walk into that archetype. Be the fighter, be the explorer, be the poet. Think of Shakespeare's 7 stages of man. You are not the patriarch and the statesman. You are the young lover. That is the archetype that you're experiencing. And the young lover does not need to have women. This is the misunderstanding of the dichotomy. The young lover only needs to have a poetic soul that experiences passion and ardor and the desire to fight. He does not need to actually have like some kind of girlfriend or sexual experience with women. That is female framing. Male sexual energy exists prior to its contact with the female. If anything, female sexuality needs male sexuality to exist. See lesbians. It's like a functionally an asexual relationship. But thank you. Protein chowder for $10. Dave, 22-year-old software dev, earning good money. Should I pivot to something else? What's your personal plan? What us Zoomers need is instruction and to know where we can be productive. Cheers. Look, Protein Chowder, it's pretty simple. Keep your software skills, keep them developed, like just maintain them, but branch into something else. So do software and modeling, do software and business development, do software and chemistry, like that guy said. Don't do just software. Do software and something else. That is the, like, I can't predict the future. Who knows what's going to go on with this stuff? My sense is that, you know, it's leveling out a little bit, but you know, that's not what everyone says. People are, the predictions are all over the map. No one knows what's going to happen, right? But based on what we're seeing right now, the optimal way to be is to just be a generalist. Stick your thumbs in a lot of different pies, and one of those pies is going to actually have a plum in it. That is the way you need to go. So just don't pigeonhole yourself. You probably have passions outside of programming. Do that. Like, get good at that. Like, one of my colleagues in graduate school said that, you know, being a good professional is being good at 2.5 things. So, you know, the first thing is your professional vocation you pursue in school, like your major. The second one are the skills that you actually get trained in. So in school, I was an optimizer in mathematics, a modeler. You know, now in industry, I'm doing like more development, both with AI and stuff like that. And you know, I also studied physics and other areas of science extensively as well. You know, that is but he said 2.5 things. So the first one is what you study in school. The second one is the skills you learn in your jobs, right? And then the 1/2 thing is your passion project. That is like this blog here, right? This is what gets me excited. This is how I'm changing the world. This is what I really feel passionate about. And you're only half good at that thing, not because you're not good at it, but because you only have half the amount of time to dedicate it. Typically, you're only going to have like an hour a night to work on it. So that's like, you know, about you get about maybe 10 hours a week generously. Maybe if you're single, you might have 20 hours a week. So again, like half a work week. And so the idea, the reason why you need to be good at 2.5 things, and I'm about to faint of heat exhaustion here. The reason why that is important is it's a pivoting mechanism, right? So let's say like one industry goes under, the one you majored in. Well, then you have the other one, right? And so then when one goes under, it's no longer a useful skill. You are good at 1.5 things, and then what you do is you stick a pull down in the next thing, right? The next big thing is you learn that. And then at all times you have that 1/2 passion project that is really your mission in life. That is kind of like a spiritual center for you. You never lose that. And if you're really good, sometimes you can take that 1/2 thing and turn it into a full-time career. The way that LP at iHypocrite did, the way that Carl Benjamin from Sargon of Akkad did. That's always an option too. But always think of that 2.5 things. The thing that you learned initially, the thing that you're doing now, and your passion project. And you always want to maintain those 2 major skills. And then when one evaporates, you look for a new skill to develop. Where are other people making money in this economy right now? Hopefully it's something that benefits the human race and not actually a scam. But you always want to keep that 2.5 profession structure down. I found that very, very good advice. So I'll go there. Protein Chowder for $2 says, you should run a paywall Zoomer career board. Yeah. Look, I'd love to just help people. If you meet me in public, I'll give you my opinions. I don't know the future, so you know, please take this with a grain of salt, if you may. And the last one says, Chad, the man, for $2 says, please reach out to Luke Smith for a podcast. Well, I would love to. I'll definitely do that. I'm trying to run a podcast for the Redwood Society, but I just run out of time. I keep on asking people if they want to come on this podcast that has very few subscribers. And every single time they're like, not really, but could you come on my podcast? Because I really want you on my podcast. Everyone wants me to go on their podcast. So I can never get people to come over to a podcast that like at this stage has very little people watching. So that is a thing. So we're going to do Psalm 15 from King James tonight, since we have no more super chats. Very generous super chatting. Thank you very much. But the heat is really getting to me. So we will recite Psalm 15 for strength. Lord, who shall abide in thy tabernacle? Who shall dwell on your holy hill? He that walketh upright and woke thy righteousness, and speaketh the truth in his heart. He that backbiteth not his tongue, and that doeth no evil to his neighbor, nor taketh up a reproach against his friend, in whose eyes a vile person is condemned. But he who honoreth them that fear the Lord, he that sweareth to his own hurt and changeth not, he that putteth not out his money into usury, nor taketh reward against the innocent, he that does these things shall never be moved from your love. Amen, guys. Thank you for joining me for Fiddler's Green podcast number 73, Canons and Contradictions. I wish you guys all a wonderful night and a blessed